The views and opinions expressed by tonight's guest and topic of discussion do not necessarily represent the official policy or position of Spaced Out Radio, Spaced Out Saturdays or Sundays, SOR Media, its hosts, syndicated carriers, or anyone associated with this broadcast. Any rebroadcast, reproduction, or other use of this broadcast or podcast without the expressed written consent of SOR Media is strictly prohibited. Listener discretion is advised. Are you experienced? Then come own the night with us.
Little brother has taken control, shoveling dirt in every hole. Predators to condemn your soul, watching you and watching me. We're all
Station atop the mountains of British Columbia, live from SOR headquarters. This is Spaced Out Radio with host Dave Scott.
We live behind glass curtains and act like nothing's wrong. Soon you will belong.
You can follow us on our website, spacedoutradio.com, and on Spaced Out Radio on iTunes. You can follow Dave on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio, and on Instagram at Dave Scott SOR, on Facebook at Spaced Out Radio Show, and on our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio.
Brother wants to make headlines, be immortalized. Everyone's got an electric eye with the digital spies. They've watched you for so long. I know you're out there somewhere watching me.
Buckle up, space travelers. It's time to go for a ride on Spaced Out Radio with host Dave Scott.
I know you're out there somewhere. We've watched you for so long. Wait for you to fall. We'll expose you all. I know you're out there somewhere watching me. Little brother wants to make headlines, be immortalized.
It's Thursday, August 23rd, Friday, August 24th, if you're on the East Coast or across the pond. And this, my friends, is Spaced Out Radio. Hope you had a great day and night. I am your host, Dave Scott, broadcasting to you live from the Great White North on top of the smoky, rainy mountains of central British Columbia, right here at SOR headquarters. We are 150,000 strong nightly on the SOR radio network and Deep Talk Radio, and we say hello to each and every one of you. If you want to take part in our archives, looking for them, wondering where they are free on our YouTube channel. Go to youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. Hit that subscribe button. Our website is spacedoutradio.com, where we have a plethora of features for you. You can rock out to Bumblefoot, shop at our store, read up on the encounter online, and so much more. Don't forget, tickets are now on sale for the first annual Caribou Paracon, presented by Spaced Out Radio and the Canadian Society of Questers, September 28th through 30th, right up here in beautiful 108 Mile Ranch, British Columbia. Go to questers.ca. That's questers.ca. Click on the fall conference and get your tickets today. Remember, if you're in the USA, those tickets are in Canadian funds, so you're going to be saving a ton of dough. Tonight's show is brought to you by the YouTube channel Ensuho. Sebastian Martin brings high-quality messages to the masses. Go to spacedoutradio.com, click on the Ensuho banner, and subscribe to the channel today. One thing every human being has in common, whether you are rich or poor, fat or skinny, successful or struggling, is that we're all going to die. That's just plain simple fact of life, as scary as that is. But when people seem to get closer to their own finality, sometimes there are those who have visions of what it's like on the other side. Maybe it's family who's already over there and wanting to connect. Religious icons there to help the crossover to the other side. There are many stories out there of people seeing things before their time on this side of the veil runs out. Tonight, Dr. Carla Wills-Brandon is here to talk about these visions that she has studied. Dr. Carla has studied terminally ill patients, and she's noticed some patterns in what people on their last legs of life are experiencing. Then in the bottom of hour number 3, we go to the encounter. From the Spaced Out Radio newsroom, we have director Everett Thiemer coming on to join us for the final half. Dr. Carla Wills-Brandon, thank you so much for coming out and hanging out with me tonight on Spaced Out Radio. How are you?
I'm fine. Thank you, Dave. I mean, it's great to be on your show, and I did not know that you were in Canada.
Oh, we hide that. We hide that truth. We just hide it. You know.
Don't do that.
Well, us Canadians, we like to be a little bit, subdued about certain things,
Well, yeah, that's true.
So, you know what? Might as well play to the profile. Well, we're very glad to have you tonight. And I got to be honest with you, we have never, ever done this topic on this show. And I am so excited to be able to have you on this show and talk about this, because you are one of the top researchers in the world when it comes to this field of study. And I want to learn a little bit about you right before we get going too heavily into this discussion tonight. And how did you end up getting into this? What made you decide that this was a path that you needed to study?
Well, it's a kind of long, winding, twisted road, as are all things. I grew up in a family where my grandfather sat out in the backyard with a mayonnaise jar full of wine, and he waited for the UFOs to land. And the reason for that was because there were mass sightings in the late 40s and early 50s. And so my family, they were pretty open about stuff like this. My mom went to a healer when she got very, very sick with cancer. And there are lots of books underneath her bed. And so she never really pushed any dogma on us religiously. And she was really good about letting us we could ask questions, and we could not agree with things and that were out there in the traditional world. And so it left me with a very open mind. But there were other problems in the family that kept me from feeling safe talking once she was gone. And the first departing vision I had was when me and a bunch of my girlfriends decided to go see Sly and the Family Stone. Now, Sly, of course, was imbibing a little bit, so he was late for the show. This is kind of a common theme for him. And so we sat there for a while, and suddenly I got really sick. I felt sick. So I saw an ambulance, and I walked over to it, and I said, "Can I please lay down inside?" And the man said, "Sure." And I slept through the whole concert. Now, when I got home, what I discovered, now I'm only 15, I discovered that when I was feeling sick and wanting to lay down in the ambulance, all of a sudden, that's the exact time my mother was being put into an ambulance. So what that's called is that's an empathetic departing vision, where we can actually feel our loved one passing, or we can feel illness of our loved one. And then afterwards, we feel perfectly fine. I mean, there's a woman who I worked with who had a father who was in one state and she was in another. She suddenly felt so ill, and she felt like she was having a heart attack, and she crashed to the floor, and she didn't know what was going on. And then a few minutes later, she received a phone call telling her that, yes, indeed, her father had passed. So that was my first experience. The second one had to do with my mother's passing. When she moved on, she went right before she moved on. I was at home, and she was in the hospital. And suddenly I woke up at 5 o'clock in the morning, and I felt this feeling that she was there, and she was hugging me, and saying goodbye. And so I laid back down and then thought, I better go sit by the phone. So I went and sat by the phone. And yes, I got a phone call 5 minutes later telling me she had passed. Now, the funny thing is, 2 family friends at the exact moment of her passing had an experience like mine. And then when I posted this story on one of my sites, my cousin got a hold of it, and she contacted me, and she said that she and my aunt had also had this experience. So that's 5 people who had that experience, all in different locations. Well, there was no one to talk to back then about this stuff. No one. People were very closeted. It just wasn't cool. You were looked at as if you were on, constant LSD, or something was really wrong with you. So I went to school, and I tried talking to my peers about this because I thought it was fascinating. This was telling me that, oh, wow, death is not, physical death is not the end. Well, sadly, they looked at me like I was nuts. And so I just pushed it aside. I didn't, say anything or do anything. But then I started working with extreme trauma. So when the Challenger space shuttle blew up, my husband and I, we worked flight medicine during that time. So that was kind of how I started out. And my first 5 or 6 books are about trauma and about how to recover from that. And my practice was mainly trauma. But then what began to happen were that people would come in my office and they'd say to me, now, I have all my teeth, I have a job, I don't imbibe, I'm a really nice person, but I need to tell you this. And they tell me these stories about seeing angels when they were in the hospital and they were close to death. That's also a near-death experience.
Right. Yeah. I got to ask you, as someone who has a master's in clinical psychology, how did you take these stories at first very seriously? Because for someone going into this field, to hear this type of story, you must have been wondering whether or not at some point that these people were just having some sort of psychological problems as they started to wind down their life.
Well, let me tell you something. Okay, if I have 6 patients who come in, and all of them have psychosis and they hallucinate, what I'm going to see is each individual is going to be very different. So I have to actually step into their hallucination in order to help them kind of untangle some of this stuff. And of course, they have to be, have proper medication. And each person may have different medication. If I were to see 6 people in a row who had departing visions, it would be very consistent that either they had a dream or there was a manifestation, or they had precognition of somebody about to pass. And the feeling was always, it was kind of scary at first. I'll give you another example in a minute. But then afterwards, if they were like really rotten patients and really death phobic, they were kind and they were concerned and they were interested after they had the departing vision. So for me, I always knew there was something to what I had experienced and what I continued to experience. I was in London, and I was going to go do a workshop, and I was in the tunnel, and all of a sudden they kicked us all out. That's when were bombings back then. And so, they kicked us out, and so I walked around the streets a little bit, and I saw this bookstore, one of those ratty old used bookstores. And I walked into it, and as I was looking around, I spotted this very thin little green book. And it was a book that was published in 1926. And it was published by a guy who was a physicist, and his wife was a gynecological surgeon. Now, he was very skeptical when his wife would come to him and say, I had a patient. She looks like she's going to pass, but she's talking about seeing her sisters, and her sisters are both deceased. Or I have a patient, and she's close to passing, and she's talking about, a friend who passed away this morning, but she doesn't have any information about that. So after I read this, I thought, oh my gosh, I got to get some more information. And so then I picked up the work of Carla Wills and, Erlinger Haraldson. I think I'm getting the last name wrong. But anyway, I picked up their book, and they had done a very, 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 they were very good about doing a clean study. And what they did is they measured people who were dying in the States and in India. And this process with them first started in the 50s and continued through the 60s and the 70s. And so what they did is they had this questionnaire, and instead of saying deathbed vision or any of that stuff, they said, did you notice that your patient had any hallucinations? And what they did is they calculated statistically all of that information, and they discovered several things. It didn't matter if you were rich or poor. It didn't matter what your religion was, female, male. It doesn't matter what your illness was. It doesn't matter what medications you're on. There are some real similarities between people who have these experiences. And then Kubler-Ross, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, she was like this chain-smoking Swiss woman, and she kind of cracked me up. And she wrote the book on death and dying, The Stages of Grief, and it was a bestseller. Well, she had a whole chapter on children having departing visions. But basically what she heard back then from her publisher is, you won't be putting that in your book. So, it's kind of like a lot of us, I think, stayed in the closet. I know I did for a while, until my son had a departing vision with his grandfather, and then all bets were off. He started talking about somebody named Damas sitting next to him all the time. And so when we would travel, he'd be in the back seat in his car seat playing, and he'd get tired. So when he got tired, he'd say to me, come here, Mama, let Damas drive. Basically what he wanted to do was nurse. And he'd get really angry with me because I'd say, no, I don't see Damas, so I'm not getting in the back seat with you. We'll take care of things when we get to the beach or wherever we were going. And so it was a Friday night. We'd had a really, really hard day with my father-in-law. He was a communist who escaped France. And if he hadn't escaped with my mother-in-law, he would have ended up in the concentration camps with the rest of the family. But he was just being very stubborn. And he was also a physician, a surgeon. And so doctors and hospice workers would come in and they would talk right over him. The anger he had was amazing. And my sister, who passed actually 6 months ago, she kept saying to him, Sylvan, go to the light, go to the light. And he would just glare at her. But anyway, my son kept having these encounters with this Damas. So I asked this friend of mine who's a rabbi, have you ever heard of what Damas is? And it's this relationship to death and dying? And so my friend took out a pen, got a napkin, wrote it out in Hebrew, and then wrote it out in Aramaic and said, oh yeah, that's the angel of death who comes and assists us to go to the next world. And I just sat there. I didn't know how to respond because my son at that time, he was 3 years old, very young. And so when my father-in-law did pass, we asked if Damas was around, and he looked at us like we were so dumb. And he said, Damas is gone. Damas went to the sky with Da. And for him, it was like, what's wrong with you? This is like, what's your problem? You can't recognize and see this? So after that experience, I really had to just say to myself, stop being such a coward. It doesn't matter what people think. It doesn't matter, I lost some business because of it, I'll be honest. But, I just had to start doing more research and putting together more books on it and doing more workshops on this because we live in such a death-phobic society. It's so
yes.
It's so death-phobic. Jeez. Have you ever been to one of those funerals where people, they dress appropriately and everybody does everything perfectly? And people bring maybe food, or the religious organization prepares food. And then as soon as there's burial or cremation, nothing is said. That's it, end of discussion. And so people like that end up in my office because they don't know why they're depressed. And they can show up 50 years later after a passing. And it's something they've never grieved. So our society also doesn't know how to grieve. It's seen as a weakness, which is just true. Oh, yeah.
And most people have a phobia of death in itself. I know I do. And it literally causes my anxiety to go absolutely crazy. But, on the flip side, I think we all are looking for some sort of answer and just don't know where to look, whether, we are the survivors or whether we are the people in the position of passing. It's almost like the people in the position of passing are at more peace, unless it's tragic, than us who are, left to grieve.
Well, the person, so my mother-in-law was this woman who, she also escaped the Holocaust. She lost her mother. Her sister was in a camp and her brother was in a camp. But she always felt, even though she was brilliant, she was a professor and chair of a French department, and she was like the first women's libist, extremist, uber, there you go, woman I'd ever met. She had a thick Polish accent, and she liked to cook cow tongue, and she's just a real trip. When she finally got sick, and she was just like, she was angry and hateful and difficult, and because she had read my first book that I wrote on departing visions, and she called it Superstitious Nonsense. And so when I got ready to write another one, and I had the manuscript, I said, do you want to take a look at this? And she said, I can't because I'm not spiritual enough. And that just broke my heart. But when she was getting ready to pass, she started arguing. And she was arguing with somebody who wasn't there. And then we heard the word Malpa. And Malpa is Polish for monkey. And that's what my father-in-law, that's what she called him. That was her pet name for him. So she was having this conversation with him and telling him, no, I'm not going. I'm not ready. I'm not ready. And by that time, we were all saying, it's okay, go with God, go, it's okay. And so she continued this for a couple of days. Of course, some hospice worker walked in and decided she was, like losing her mind and that she needed serious medication. And we said to her, we all took a vote and we said, no, she doesn't need medication. Because I told the family what was going on. And so, but then when we came back, the following day, she looked very, very calm. And she looked very at peace. And there were tears running down her eyes. And she was talking in Polish. We had to have her sister come and translate for us. Because when people prepare to pass, if their tongue of origin isn't English, what they're going to do is they're going to go back to their, German language, Russian language, Italian language. So she was talking in Polish to her mother, Kasia. And it was like the most incredible, it was just awesome to see her heal after almost, 50 years of suffering because her mother had died in the camps. And so right after that, she passed very peacefully. So did another person that I worked with. I was in the hospital with her, and she was German, and she reverted back to German, and she was talking to people about herself and her life, and her husband said to me, what should I do? And I said, talk German back to her, just talk back. But she was definitely scared to death of death. And yes, and we would try to talk about it a little bit, and she just didn't want to have any part of it. But she eventually had a departing vision, and she calmed down, and she passed very peacefully. So, if you look back 200 to 300 years ago, when death was it was like part of the life. It's part of the timeline. It wasn't seen, children weren't sheltered from that stuff. They were with sick people, and they were with older people. And so when a person was preparing to pass, they'd usually be in their own bed with their own Afghan, with their favorite pet, and with all the family around. That was really common, very common. And so during that time, they'd be saying their goodbyes, or they'd be discussing. One person actually talked about his will, like, don't let them have this, that this is for you, kind of thing. So, I mean, it's like, it was seen as just a transition from one space to another. And it was seen as nothing to really be afraid of. As my son said, the biggest sadness was not having them in skin anymore. And so, I think today, people are in the hospital, and I know my mother passed in a hospital, and that was very sad. My sister, who passed away, I had a departing vision with her the day after Christmas. She came to me in a dream, and she said, well, I'm going now. She had her backpack on and her corduroy pants and her earth shoes, and I just went, oh, okay. And then a couple hours later, we got a phone call from a facility that she had passed. But, that's the way it is now, is that most people pass in a nursing home or they pass in the hospital. Even some hospice organizations aren't real good about giving family members information on departing visions. And then clergy too have a problem with it sometimes. My next book is on Jewish afterlife beliefs, because there's this belief that, the Jewish population doesn't have these experiences. Well, yeah, they do. They just closet themselves because they don't feel like they're supposed to talk about it. So the death, if one has parents who are super religious, or if they were death phobic, or if the parents had unresolved grief, real serious grief about losses, PTSD from war, family of origin abuses, those kind of things, what that can do is that can set up this fear of disappearing. And so the sense is that when we die, we just disappear. And we don't matter anymore. And
I do have to ask you, if you don't mind, because just listening to the start of this show, I think there's two different subjects here. I mean, you have the people who are grieving, who are looking for a sign. Then you have the people who are dying and getting that sign. So really, how do you combine the two? Because are they not two completely different studies?
Well, actually, the living and those who are preparing to pass can each have departing visions. So what happens for the living is that they will suddenly have a sense that their loved one in the hospital, something's not right, doesn't feel good. Some people report getting very emotional when a person is passing and not knowing why they're emotional. Some people have even been visited, spirit-wise, soul-wise, whatever you want to call it. I had a nurse who talked about the man that she really, really helped, that she saw him. And she saw him, and he said to her, thank you for helping me and my daughter, and then he disappeared. So, that was that's a pre-death experience. He passed shortly after that. Now, those who are preparing to die, okay, also those who are survivors, they can be visited by other relatives, who have preceded, to warn them that something's going to happen and to just be prepared. And so other things are precognition. I have a friend who has incredible precognition of upcoming deaths. And she hates it. And she really needs somebody to teach her how to work with that. So basically, the living can have these experiences. Now, what that provides for them is that provides for them peace, because they know that their loved one is going to a safe place and it's okay. For the one who's preparing to pass, for them, they can have visions of what's to come. I've had lots of reports of, if you want to call it the next world or heaven or whatever, that's what they like. I've had lots of reports of that, and that's very interesting. And so they can have precognitions of their own passing too. There's this woman that I worked with, and she had a son, and they were very, very close, and they went out to lunch, and the mother looked at the son and said, "I'm going to be dead this time next year." And of course, the son said, "Oh, no, Mom, what are you talking about?" And he was so upset, and he came and he asked me what that was about, and I said, well, it could be a departing vision experience, or it could be something else. So, I don't think I'd worry about it. Well, don't you know, that woman died close to the day she made the prediction, a year later. So she had precognition of her own passing. They can be visited by, my experience is they haven't been visited by people who they have issues with, people who, they're usually greeted by people who they care about and they love. And the reunions are grand. There was a reunion with a Greek family. And this woman, she was preparing to pass. And she got mad at her daughter because she wanted her to get up off the chair so that Aunt so-and-so could sit in the chair. And there were all of these family members in there with this woman who is passing, children, and other people. And so they all saw the same thing. And then the woman said, "I want you to prepare a feast because all the family has arrived." And so she said, you need to go in the kitchen, and you need to do this, and you need to do that. And so a couple of the girls started asking her questions. Well, who's here? And she said, "It's the family. It's like they're going to take care of me when I go." And so she said, "But we have to have a party." And so, you can also have the shared experience where there was a man and his wife, and she was preparing to pass, and he loved her so desperately, and it was so sad. He has so much grief. But the two of them together, right before she passed, found themselves out of their body, both of them, and they were traveling through a tunnel, and then she turned around and said to him, "You can't come any farther. You have to go back. You have to stay." And he was heartbroken because he really wanted to go with her. So that's a shared experience. So these experiences have a profound impact on those that experience them or are told about them, witnessing them. I've got accounts from all around the world.
Right.
Yeah.
I want to ask you this because I had my 29-year-old nephew pass away just over a month ago. And I had to read his eulogy and everything like that. And it was probably one of the toughest things I've ever had to do in my life because literally that was the first time in my life that I saw life from start to finish, if you understand what I'm saying by that. And, I remember him being born, and now I have to remember him passing away. And I'm not saying that to be depressed, but one of the things I said in my speech, and I'm wondering if it's kind of too harsh. I said the tears that we are crying today, and we're going to cry a lot, are selfish. Because in reality, if you're a believer in some sort of higher power, that you're going to a better place. But for us, it's almost selfish because we want the person here. We don't want them to be gone. We don't want them to be dead. It's all about us. As individuals and as a community of people. So is the experiences that we're having or the emotions that we have, whether it's based out of guilt or or just hurt feelings. Is that selfish?
No, it's healthy. But you did say something to kind of shake them up, and that's really good what you said. When my sister died, I was so angry at her because she was just the type of person who could not get her act together, and she blamed everybody else. So when I got her ashes, and I still have them actually, because I'm still doing my grief work with her. And so, yes, there's a selfish part of me that wants her back to be my sister. And why did she do that? And why did she, I had this myth that we would be old ladies together. And so, yeah, definitely. Those are selfish feelings, but they're also normal for grief. But what I did when I first got her ashes back is I would sit and look at them and scream at them. And just yell and scream and talk about everything that she had done that had been so upsetting to so many people. And I needed to do that because anger is a part of grieving. And then afterwards came sadness, extreme sadness, about how she had lived her life, about how she had pulled away from the family, about, I just had to have my grief. And it still comes and goes. So, people do grief differently feeling-wise. My husband is the type of person who, he had an aunt who was in the Holocaust, and she passed away. And he was kind of wrecked about it. But then with his mother was kind of difficult. So his grieving was very, very different. It has to do a lot with our relationship with the person. It has to do a lot with, I believe in the afterlife. I have mediumistic ability. And so I've seen the other side in a variety of different ways. But still, I have to grieve the relationship. And I have to grieve the fact that, I had all these dreams for this relationship. And it didn't work out. And so, saying it's selfish, it is selfish. I know that in my groups, my circles, we talk about that. About how it is selfish, but that's normal. It's a normal thing. You probably gave them some good information that they needed to have.
Well, it was just one of those difficult situations because I think we're all kind of comprehending. My nephew died of a fentanyl overdose.
Oh, wow.
And he was found beautifully sleeping on a beautiful park bench under a beautiful old oak tree.
Oh, wow.
And he, he had been in rehab and clean since May 1st. And then the devil on his shoulder, that little voice that says, come on, just one more time. That's what got him. Right.
Yes.
And it happens. And, and as traumatizing and as terrible as it was, because he was my sister's only child.
Oh, bless her heart.
It is very difficult. But if you look for the signs, the signs that people have crossed over, it's amazing what you can actually see.
That's right.
And I'll give you an example of that, okay? Recently, I never, ever bought this BS about finding dimes. There's that old wives' tale about finding dimes.
Or pennies.
Yeah, or pennies. Well, Canada doesn't have pennies anymore. We've moved up in stature. We got rid of them. But nonetheless, I hear a lot of stories about people who find dimes, and it's said to be from that loved ones are thinking of you or near you. And I never bought into that. As much as I like to believe in the woo factor of everything, that was one that just didn't make sense to me.
Yeah.
Well, all of a sudden, in the last week and a half, I've found 3.
Did you really?
And I'm someone, I don't carry change.
Yeah.
Okay, I never have change on me. I found 2 on my driveway, just sitting there, where we don't normally park. Mm-hmm. And I found 1 in my pocket.
Oh, okay.
And like I said, I never carry change. My kids don't carry change. We're a debit card type family. Why carry money when you can just put it on your card, right?
Right.
And so to find this, I don't know really how to react to it because I never really believed in that, and all of a sudden it's happening. But I've heard it now from so many people, and now
Yes.
experiencing it myself, now I'm thinking, is there something really to this?
Well, I'll tell you that we get pennies from Michael's father. If there's a crisis going on, if we're traveling somewhere, we'll just find pennies. And so we just kind of take it at face value. And we intuitively know it's Da, that it's Pop who is doing this. And so, I think that there was a time when I thought that was really hokey too, until I had the experience. There was this woman who I was in a circle with, and her son was murdered. It was so tragic. He was a young guy, drugs and alcohol as usual, in a bad crowd. And so he refused to go to a 12-step program or do what he needed to do. And so he got, pissed off some gangbangers or something. And so anyway, he died in the driveway. They killed him. And so then she began to get white feathers in the house. She doesn't have any ducks. She didn't have any, swans walking around her house. She would just find these white feathers, and she started putting them in a bowl. And she filled the bowl up. And she said, I think this is from my son. I think he's telling me he's okay. And she said, I just feel it. I just feel it. And so she continues to collect all these white feathers that just show up. So, and for her, she does believe it's from her son. And one person in the circle did criticize her about that. And she left the circle, which I think was so sad. So, I know that there was this guy who lived next door to us. He was a real Texas guy, and he lived to be 105. And every time he saw me, he said, do you want to come have a cocktail with me? And I'd say, Mr. Harris, you know I don't drink. And he'd say, how about a soda water? And he was very sharp to the very end. Well, when he passed, all of a sudden his alarm system started going off at 2 o'clock in the morning. And so we'd go over there and we'd check it out, and, it didn't seem like there were any problems. A couple times the police came. And so after his alarm kept going off, like for a couple of weeks, we asked the grandson, can you disconnect this? Just disconnect this thing. Something's going on. After it was disconnected, it still continued. And it made perfect sense to us because Mr. Harris had a wicked sense of humor. And so, it did stop. But there are all of these experiences with people with radios. All of a sudden the radio goes up, or all of a sudden all clocks in their house stop, or people can sense those on the other side. There's just the sensation that they're there. So when I'm making like ethnic food, all of a sudden I feel my grandmother there. I feel her. And when I've been in really bad places, I have felt those on the other side there for me, comforting me. So when we grow up in a society where nobody talks about that stuff, and the children aren't educated, and they're sheltered from death and dying, my 16-year-old son, when he was 16, he's now like a 32-year-old man, but when he was 16 years old and his grandmother died, he wanted to see her body. And so I said, well, that's okay, you're 16. And so he went to the funeral parlor, and what he did is he went back and he saw her and he said, yep, no one's home, and he walked out. And so, my sons, they don't have any fear of death. It's not something that bothers them. But if you grew up with some sort of religion, or some sort of philosophy from parents, or even if your parents were wonderful, if the parents grew up with death and dying issues, if there is a secret suicide in the family, or other issues with death and dying, and nobody was able to see that back then, if they weren't in the bed, they were laid out on the parlor table, and everybody sat around. And then when everybody left, somebody stayed there for the night, and that there was a belief that the spirit was there still. I had the experience of a friend of mine who passed, and I had the experience of sensing him talking to me at the funeral and bitching about everybody. And so, I mean, I felt kind of embarrassed because I wasn't sobbing at his funeral, because there was a sense, and I clairvoyantly saw him. And so it was a very, very comforting experience. Funny as hell. But if you're not exposed to that kind of stuff, what happens is the society kills us. They kill us emotionally and spiritually. So, yeah.
Getting to the people who are seeing things on this side and trying to get more comfortable with death, how would you describe that the average person goes along with that? I mean, I'm one of these people, and I'm sure there's a lot of others out there, who I can be so tired, up for 20 hours, and all I want to do is go lay down in my bed. But the minute my head hits that pillow, and if I start thinking, you know, and my mind starts racing, and I get that death thing that, oh my God, I'm 45 years old, and no man in my family except one has lived past 71. And I start that panic thinking, I am
scared. They're afraid to sleep. They don't know how to handle it because they don't have any information. Then you have people who start counting. Okay, so all the men in my family died in their early 70s, and I'm in my mid 40s, and that's what I can't calculate it right now. Number of years that I have left, and so it's like a straitjacket of fear, and a lot of people have that, and they come into the office and they're embarrassed to talk about it, and no one should ever be embarrassed about talking with a therapist or somebody who's even a close friend, if you can feel them out and see that this is something that they can listen to. But you'd be surprised. People don't even talk about their fear of death openly because they don't want people to look at them like they're cracked. And so when I have somebody like that come into the office, we do a lot of work. We do work with first, they come in with all pictures of all the people who have passed that they love. And we look at them all. And they get a sense of how they felt about each one. And what's so interesting is that if we talk about a particular relative or friend, and they start asking questions of that person during visualization, you know, it's so interesting. Their answers are so quick. They're very quick back, you know? And they say to me, it feels like the person's right here. And so things like that, and reading about after-death communication, and the whole mediumship thing, there's so many frauds out there. I can't, I went to Arthur Findlay College, and so that's where I was trained, but I don't have a shingle out, announcing I'm a medium. But, talking to somebody who is credible, for God's sakes, don't go to some of these things where these guys are charging $150 to be in a gallery where they spout off, or $200 or $100 to be in a private group. I think it's $500 is the last thing I saw, because that's fraud. That's pure fraud. But, start looking at people who were skeptics, who are pure skeptics of life after death. And then suddenly something happened and they had to reevaluate. There were people who, after the Holocaust, they were so angry at God. And some of them today are still very angry at God. But they were so angry, how could God let this happen? 6 million of us. My family, my children, my possessions were taken away. How could a God do that to me? And there are a few, and they stayed angry, and they got angry, and then they got very, very sad, and they grieved, and a couple of them tracked down Nazis. But my point is that they eventually came to this place where, I don't have to believe in that hateful God. I can find, as you said, a higher power, something that suits me. and I can build a connection with that. And so it is a journey. This is a journey. It's like society has put us all in a hole of fear. I mean, we have so many products for anti-aging, and there's all this plastic surgery. Some of these women come in and everything's been redone. Some of it too much. Children, 15, are getting breast implants. I mean, some of the stuff that I see is ridiculous. And it all has to do with the mom who still dresses like a teenager, who wants to be a buddy to her kid. And so the message to the kid is, getting old is not good.
Well, I'm going to tell you a little funny story here because, as weird as it sounds, and I used to work on my channeling skills.
Uh-huh.
And before my son was born, I channeled him.
Okay.
And basically, I was very worried because I knew I was going to be a father again at 40.
Okay.
And my daughter was born when I was 25. So, that was a big decision to make, and to get used to the fact that you're starting all over again. And I remember, him saying, "Don't worry, Dad, I've added time to your life so we can have time together." They've added time to your life. Mm-hmm. And I said, okay. And I said, well, what age now? And he goes, 85. And I'm like, very cool with that. But,
yeah.
But then a couple weeks ago, my son now, who is 5, he all of a sudden starts crying in our kitchen. And this was after, because he does have paranormal experiences that happen. And he starts crying in the kitchen. And I said, what's the matter, buddy? He goes, I don't want you to die.
Oh, he's yelling here. Whoa. Okay.
And then he follows that up after I said, buddy, I'm not going to die for a long time. And then he goes, but Daddy, you were going to die soon.
Okay.
And I'm like, well, that's not very, very kosher. Like, I don't like hearing that, Okay. And so here I am. I got one message, and then I get the other one. And I'm sitting here saying, you got to be kidding me. Like, what is it? Am I dying tomorrow, or am I going at 85? Like, I don't want to be ripped off here,
Okay. I'll tell you what happened is that, kids will sense if we have a phobia. If we have a phobia toward flowers, our kids, they pick up on stuff like that. They're like little sponges. And so even when they're pre-verbal, they're still picking stuff up. Now, the channeling with your son is called a pre-birth experience. And there's a woman who actually studies that. I can't remember her name. And I think that's very cool. I would trust that message over your son. But your son has somehow picked up on the fact that there's death phobia in the family. And so that's why he popped off like that. And I've seen that with children before, where they'll spout out and they'll see something like that. They'll say something like that. And then the whole family is kind of shocked. And then, he's 5 years old. So if he's having, I know my son Josh had this, if he's having paranormal experiences, there's a part of him that doesn't really understand it all.
No. And that night I had caught him, right before he said that, I had caught him just kind of staring off into the abyss, but it was like he was trying to focus on something. Mm-hmm. And I just let him do that before I said, hey, buddy, what are you looking at? And he was like, oh, nothing. I'm like, really? What are you looking at? Because we're pretty open here.
Yeah.
And then, as he's eating his cereal a couple of minutes later, we see what looks like these about 18-inch long by about 3-4 inches wide captain's bars of light.
Oh, really?
Going through our kitchen.
Okay.
And I saw them, and when I looked at him, because I quickly looked at him to see if he was looking at them too, because I had him in my peripheral vision on my left, and he was staring up at them too. And I asked him, I said, did you just see that? And he's like, that light? Yeah. And so I know he's seeing things. I mean, that's pretty obvious. But and then he followed up with that comment. So here I am thinking, what the hell is going on here, you know? And just so you know, we got about 45 seconds before we have to go to break. So I can
tell you real quick.
Sure.
He got scared. He got scared.
Could be.
And so he didn't understand what those lights were. And so kids will kind of try to dismiss stuff like that, but then they'll put their fear somewhere else.
Perfect.
So I don't want him to die, Dad. He got scared.
I don't blame him. I don't blame him at all. Dr. Carla, I'm going to get you to hold on here while we exit for our first break of the night. Dr. Carla Wills-Brandon is our guest tonight. We are talking about deathbed visions. We're going to find out what it's like from people on their deathbed. What are they seeing? Who are they talking to? This coming up in hour number 2. If you want to check out Carla's website, go to carlawillsbrandon.com. You're listening to Spaced Out Radio. I am your host, Dave Scott. We'll be back right after this.
Find your escape where time has no limits. It's about living today and cherishing the heritage of yesterday. A spirit of adventure for what is new, with the nostalgia of the past. Your timepiece is a reflection of who you are. Life surrounded by beauty from the world around us to the soul within. EscapeWatches.com. There is no time like the present to enjoy your escape. Use promo code SMF2017 for your 20% discount today.
The freedom to post what you want, when you want. That's the social media freedom you need. Social Media Freedom is the free app in your app store. No need to worry about going to jail or being shadow banned any longer. It's the freedom to say what you feel. The freedom to know Big Brother isn't watching. It's the way social media is supposed to be. Social Media Freedom. It's time to set yourself free. Download from your app store today.
Coming September 28th to the 30th, it's our first annual Caribou Paracon, put on by Spaced Out Radio and the Canadian Society of Questers. 3 days of paranormal, supernatural, and spiritual knowledge in the beautiful 108 Mile Ranch, British Columbia. Tickets are $150 Canadian for the event, being held at the Spruce Hills Resort and Spa. Come watch our featured speaker, Grant Cameron, along with Lorian Fenton, David Weatherly, Ross Allison, and more. The Caribou Paracon, celebrating everything paranormal.
Hi there, I'm Butch Witkowski, lead investigator with U4Cop. On the final Monday of every month, you can listen to me and host Dave Scott on Spaced Out Radio's Strange Days. We're going to get to the heart of the matter when it comes to what's happening out there. People are seeing and experiencing things from ET contact to Bigfoot, and I want to hear about it. Your experiences are what we investigators need to help solve these unknown mysteries. So tune in at spacedoutradio.com to the final Monday of every month from Butch Witkowski's Strange Days.
Hi there, this is Tessa Nicole Thomas, and I'm going to take you for a ride every Sunday night on Spaced Out Sundays. I'm going to set up your week with some strange tales from across North America, from psychic readings, Sasquatch, UFOs, to the most haunted locations. Come join me at spacedoutradio.com starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern, and let's get weird together. I'd love for you to join me. Spaced Out Sundays at spacedoutradio.com.
There's news, and there's The Encounter. This is Spaced Out Radio News Director Everett Thiemer inviting you to check out The Encounter. Our half-hour news segment every Monday through Friday night is different compared to what you're used to. Our goal is to bring you the weird, strange, and interesting stories the mainstream tends to leave out, and stories that will make you scratch your head in disbelief. The Encounter can also be found at spacedoutradio.com and on our Facebook page, SOR The Encounter. Come give us a read.
We're bringing scientific thought to the paranormal. Hi there, this is Spaced Out Radio scientist Chris Cogswell. Join me, Chris Zuger, and Dave Scott the second Wednesday of every month, where we break down the who from the woo when it comes to everything paranormal. We'll investigate and try to bring sensible answers to those straight and sometimes outlandish questions people have. Hey, not everything has an answer, but we'll do our best. Listen in to Reality Paranormal only on Spaced Out Radio.
Heading to Vancouver and looking for some great nightlife? The Moose Vancouver is the place to be. Catch a game on one of the big screens or just come rock out to your favorite 80s and 90s hair bands. Great food starting at $6.95. The Moose Vancouver is open until 2 a.m. nightly. It's easy to find near the corner of Nelson and Granville. The Moose Vancouver is the official rocking bar of Spaced Out Radio.
Are you interested in advertising on Spaced Out Radio? Head to our website at spacedoutradio.com and click on our advertising tab. There, you will find an assortment of ways you can get your product out there with us, from radio commercials to banners and social media. Have a product you like our hosts to endorse? We can do that too. Visit spacedoutradio.com for more details.
Do you want to know what's really going on in your world? Do you have questions about who you can trust in the mainstream media? Then look no further than the Rebel Planet. Come get the straight answers right here at spacedoutradio.com. Join me, Jamie Sexton, creator of Rebel Planet News, as I fill you in on the stories behind the stories. All you truth seekers, be sure to tune in to Rebel Planet on spacedoutradio.com the third Thursday of every month.
Visit purpleplates.com today. For over 40 years, the Purple Energy Plates have been delivering amazing results for their many customers. Inspired by the great genius Nikola Tesla, the harmony, healing, and energetic effects of the plates have proven over and over to be beneficial and often miraculous to thousands of customers. Check their site for daily specials and choose from their many energy products. You won't be sorry. Visit them today at purpleplates.com.
So, you love talk radio? Then you'll love TalkStreamLive.com. TalkStream Live is always on, 24/7, with the best streaming talk shows. Find your favorite talkers and discover some new ones. It's free, readily available online or on mobile with any smartphone or tablet. Finding your favorite talk shows all in one place has gotten a whole lot easier. Just go to TalkStreamLive.com. Be sure to download the free apps from Google Play or the iTunes App Store.
Hey, this is Canadian Paranormal Investigator Mike Moore. The third Wednesday of every month, I'll be teaming up with Dave Scott to bring you Ghosts of the Great White North. Each month, we will bring on guests from across Canada to discuss their ghostly encounters. Canada is a paranormal hotbed with stories you've never heard, so we're going to bring them to you. So get comfy on your Chesterfield, grab a donut, and join us, eh?
The views and opinions expressed by tonight's guest and topic of discussion do not necessarily represent the official policy or position of Spaced Out Radio, Spaced Out Weekend, Spaced Out Radio Limited, its hosts, syndicated carriers, or anyone associated with this broadcast. Would you like to connect with us? Head to spacedoutradio.com for all your latest show info. And hit us up on Twitter using the hashtag SpacedOutRadio. Now, back to Dave Scott and SOR.
Welcome back to the second hour of Spaced Out Radio. Tonight, I am your host, Dave Scott. Thank you so much for being with us. Tomorrow night on the program, Lori Moon Boggs is going to join us. We're going to talk about the strangeness of premonitions. We get going at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern time at spacedoutradio.com. We say hello to everyone listening in on the SOR Radio Network and Deep Talk Radio. And don't forget, if you're looking for our archives, they are free on our YouTube channel. Go to youtube.com and /Spaced Out Radio. Do me a favor, hit that subscribe button. Bill Cardwell has set the password for tonight in the SOR Space Travelers Club. Staganov Thamada. Staganov Thamada is your password. Make sure you use it wisely, Space Travelers, as Bill sets the password each and every night right here on the mighty SOR. Our website is spacedoutradio.com, where we have a plethora of features for you. You can rock out to Bumblefoot, shop at our store, read up on the encounter online, and so much more. Don't forget, September 28th through 30th, you can join me and Spaced Out Radio at the first annual Caribou Paracon. With help from the Canadian Society of Questers, we're putting it on together. Go to questers.ca. That's questers.ca. Get your tickets today. Tonight we are talking about deathbed visions. Our guest tonight is Dr. Carla Wills-Brandon. She has her master's in psychology. And she has taken this study very, very seriously because of the experiences she has heard from people who are on their deathbed. Dr. Carla, welcome back.
Hey.
I want to get to, in this hour, really study the fact of what people are seeing when they are about to die or get to that near-death experience. Because so many times we hear people having conversations with people who are not even in the room, and yet they're talking to them just like they're there.
Yes.
What is that? What is happening at that point? Is it the brain shutting down? Is it imagination? Or is it actually loved ones or spirit guides or Jesus or God or whatever you believe in on the other side helping you prepare to cross?
Well, I mean, if I was preparing to cross, I wouldn't want the person who hurt me or stole from me. That's not the person who I would want to be there. And so when they start talking like that, and they can make hand movements too. So there was this one woman who she was very old, and she was at the hospital, and her grandson was at home, and he was in bed with his wife, and suddenly they saw her at the end of the bed, and she said, "I need some money for travel." I'm going. It's time for me to go. But people will talk about catching a train or packing their bags. Some people actually physically get up and start packing a bag. And this woman, when she appeared to her grandson, she was in a traveling outfit. And so, that's on the side of the survivor. Now, the people who are preparing to pass, what will happen for them is one moment they may be very cranky and very irritable and, lots of death phobia, and they don't know what to expect, and there's a ton of fear. And then all of a sudden they start talking about how their mother is there, how their mother has come for them. And it's a joyous reunion. One man, now this is a funny one, you'll appreciate this since we're both pet nuts here. This one woman who was getting ready to cross over, when she started to go, she saw all of her animals that she had ever had who had passed on, that they were there to greet her. So, and it was a very pleasant experience for her. Some people do, like I said before, they do give reports of the next world. And I really do feel that we take ourselves to the next experience, that we don't just, disappear, or we don't just, get bopped on the head by the good fairy and become peaceful on a cloud with a violin. When we cross over, we continue our journey. It's called spiritual evolution. And so what they will see is they will also see where they are going. They will describe places. A lot of descriptions of halls of learning have come up. That's a very common one. I had something like that. It was more of a near-death experience. And what I saw was a lot of people in a line, and they're going into this great hall, and I got into the line, and I was kind of excited about it, and I was told I couldn't stay in that line. I had to go. But people will talk about even rooms or houses, but it's like they have a plan. That's what's important. They have a plan. And when you have a plan, you're not going to have a ton of fear. And when it's a good plan and you can see it for yourself, there's a sense of relief and excitement about going. And so when people report to me that they have seen where they are going, or they will say sometimes, "I'm going on a trip. I need to have enough money for a taxi." That was my favorite one. When they say stuff like that, that means that they have had some sort of experience. They have seen something. And most of the time, we don't see what it is they're seeing. Every once in a while, we do. We have a shared experience. But they will begin gabbing and talking away with somebody who preceded them in physical death. And they will talk to them. And then what they'll do is they will turn to survivors and carry on a conversation with them. And it's very confusing. There was this guy, this was a number of years ago, but I think he was dying from AIDS, and he contacted me because he was very upset. He had a departing vision. He had seen people who were coming from him. And, he had been kind of a bitter person before that. Well, the sad thing is the doctor came in and told the family he was just hallucinating and to ignore him and don't feed it. Oh, God, they said all these horrible things. And I have heard that so many times, that the medical community, and even my area, mental health, were people who, this is the kind of stuff they say to people. They'll say things like, oh, you need to calm down, Listen, the brain thing, that has been disproven over and over again by different people. And there's a man in Britain who did a study with that, and what happened after that was a colleague of his in Ireland replicated it, and they all found that it did not matter what kind of disease they had. If they had a brain disease or if they had cancer, the visions were the same. They saw the same things. They saw places where they're going, and they saw relatives or loved ones who were going to be there with them and help them get over there. And they were excited. And they were ready to go. No longer did they wanted to go. And so, unfortunately, the medical community, I did this presentation with a bunch of nurses at a major university hospital. And so I talked about departing visions. And I was about to get run off. I was going to get run off the podium. But basically, nurses are much better than physicians. So afterward, there was a little small crowd, but, even nurses sometimes will say, oh, that's ridiculous, or don't listen to that, that's crazy. And so then the family gets really confused. And so they think that their loved one who's preparing to pass is suffering. And so what they will do is agree with the doctors for more medications and more of this and more of that. And the best thing anybody can do with someone who is passing is to start talking to them about, what do you see? What do you feel? In the old days, that's what they did. Okay? So if somebody was passing way back when, what would happen if they had a message for somebody in the room? That would be channeled through the person who is preparing to pass, and it would be given to the individual who is supposed to receive it. That was the way. That was just expected. It wasn't seen as weird. But today we've made all of that stuff very weird. And so, I think our kids, what's interesting, the video stuff, some of the video stuff is really fascinating to me in the games they play and the different realms of reality, So they're talking about realms of reality. And I just love that, because that's kind of an opening for, look, and they talk about higher levels of reality. And that's kind of an opening to, you're not going to just stay here in this one reality. You're going to move on to another reality. And so it's kind of a sideways sneak. And I don't know if the persons who have created these games know that or not, but I find it very, very fascinating.
With people who are having these experiences on their deathbed, are you 100% convinced that they are seeing things on the other side and it's just not hallucination?
Oh, yeah. Because there is a relationship factor to it. Like I said earlier, when people are having true hallucinations, there's no connection with the person. It could be Jesus or the Holy Ghost, or it could be a variety of things, but there's no connection. With these departing visions, there is a strong connection. And there is an imprint that stays with an individual who's a survivor for the rest of their life. They remember it. And there is a change in behavior for the person passing. And so there are all these behaviors that I look for. to determine if something's really going on. And when these relationship factors come up, that's pretty convincing for me. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, I don't really question it. I mean, there are some people who I know do question it, like skeptics and folks like that. But I think you can't ignore the relationship factor and the emotion that comes with it. Like my mother-in-law, seeing her mother for the first time in 50 years and breaking down. And there was a sensation that the mother was breaking down too. And it was a heavy, heavy emotion. And after that visit, that's when she left. She was waiting for her mother to show up. And so there's a sense of being very overwhelmed. Way back, during wars, people would have departing visions. They would, soldiers sitting in a tent, and suddenly he sees his sister walking through the tent. And so there were no phones, no cell phones, none of that stuff. So he just kind of blew it off. And then he got a telegram later saying that she had died on the day that he saw her in his tent. So back then, it was a little bit, there wasn't a lot of communication. They talked about it. During the Victorian age, there were mediums galore, and half of them were frauds. And I think that put a dent in, because there were some really good researchers during that time. But I think that what happened is the fraud kind of put a nip into investigation of the afterlife, and then we became, the industrialized countries, and so people sort of pulled away from anything that had to do with a spiritual experience, or if somebody did do something, if they did write about something, they were quickly dismissed. And there are some. I'm sitting right here with a book that was written. Good grief! I don't even know how old it is. It's fallen apart. It's like one of my favorite books, and it's full of these accounts. And somebody who was doing research. Oh yeah, Camille Flammarion was a very, very, very well-known researcher. This book was published in 1922, and it's called Death and Its Mysteries at the Moment of Death. Manifestations and apparitions of the dying, doubles, phenomena. Yeah, so, there were people during that era who were researching, and so thankfully I did these books, but...
Would you mind giving us a few examples of some of the messages that you have recorded in your research from people who were getting ready to pass?
Okay, I'm going home. That's the most common. They say, I'm going home. There was a guy who, his mom was dying, and he took her to his house. And she had said all the way home, I want to go home, I want to go home. So he took her to his house, and then she said, no, I don't want to go to this home. I want to go to my home, the home. The home. It's over there, the home. And so I've heard that a lot, an awful lot. I've also heard, so-and-so is here to get me. They're here to get me, and so I'm going to go. Bye. I've heard, can you pass this on to my nephew or my spouse, or can you pass this message on to them? And they'll say something like, the watch is in the drawer, I love you, and I'll be with you forever. But the messages are always very, very, they're heartfelt. They're very heartfelt. Messages like, don't weep for me. Don't cry for me. I'm fine. My job now is to be there for you. And some people have reported who are survivors. They have felt a kiss on their cheek. They have felt somebody lay on the bed next to them. They have had full conversations with individuals who are passing, like a spouse. And they know with a certainty that that's real. So it's a real. It's such an interesting field And there's so many researchers who are doing such good work on this stuff. But as far as, there are finally some articles coming out in books and, programming on television, but people still don't talk about it enough. I mean, I think if people would talk about it, if they would openly talk about their experiences, if they would share their experiences, number one, they would feel huge relief that they're not walking around with some sort of secret. And usually the people who have been carrying these secrets and have watched this and have watched their parents reunite, as father is passing, the sense that the mother is there is so, so, so strong. Also, there are smells that the dying can often have, like smelling pipe tobacco. When I'm doing mediumistic things, I pick up on cigarette smoke a lot, or pipe smoke. And I'll just say, did your loved one smoke tobacco, or did they smoke cigarettes, or whatever? But people will talk about that. Also, we had an incident at the house where the previous owners of the house, the wife came here, and she just filled the rooms with rose smell. We didn't have any roses growing, no roses anywhere. And so, those who are passing there's that sensation for them where they will feel, smell, sense, even feel like they're being touched by somebody on the other side as they prepare to pass.
What about music? A lot of people will say they hear music. I know when Mrs. Spaced Out Radio's grandmother passed away, coincidentally, I actually was privileged enough to watch her spirit leave her body at that point.
Wow.
Yeah, that was kind of cool. That was very cool. But shortly after she was pronounced dead, her favorite song was Flight of the Valkyrie.
Oh, my God.
And the funny part about that was, literally after the nurses and the doctor came in and pronounced her dead, that all of a sudden started playing on the stereo that was in there.
She picked that music and she was off.
Everybody laughed. Everybody was crying, obviously, because she was surrounded by family. But all of a sudden, that song comes on, and it's like, well, I get, everybody just started laughing because, like, what an exit.
What an exit! Yeah, that cracks me up. Well, people will hear music. They'll hear bells tinkling, or they'll hear music. They talk about, and there's all kinds of music that they'll discuss and share with me. So that's one thing too. This is sensual. This is a sense thing. So it's seeing people on the other side who have come to escort me over to the next experience. Smells to let people know I'm here and I'm around. I always have to tell spirits it's okay, quit smoking. And then I have to ask my team, thank you, okay, I understand. Can take the cigarette smoke away. They will feel things. It's just a sensation. And you talked about the spirit leaving the body. There are numerous accounts that are 200 years old that show that. My husband saw his father's spirit leave his body a day or so before he passed. It was a pastel swirl. And then my cousin, her mother became real ill, and the ambulance showed up, and before they picked her up and put her in, she saw her mother's silver spirit leave the body. So that's a really cool thing to experience, because what that says is, wow, there really is something here, and it's leaving. I mean, it's going away. So, yeah, with my mother's funeral, when I looked at her in that coffin, she did not look like her. Because there was no spark, there was no life, there was a pound of makeup on her. But she did not look like herself. When she has come to me, she looks exactly like herself, and she's much younger. People will talk about that when they have visitations from their loved ones. that they look happy and they look well and they look much younger. And so all of these senses, all these sensory activities and feelings and the emotion that comes up with it, those are the kind of things I talked about imprinting. It's kind of like my day-to-day activities. I don't remember them all. Some I don't want to. I just don't remember them. But if I have a spiritual experience like that, it stays with me. It doesn't go away. I mean, it's always there. And people, yeah.
Do you get people who are absolutely panicky because maybe they're seeing something on the dark side? Maybe they didn't lead a good life on this end, treated people well, maybe committed heinous crimes or whatever it may be. And they are literally seeing the devil's minions coming after them.
Well, I had a friend, and she passed away a while ago, and what she did is she researched hellish deathbed visions or hellish near-death experiences. And the thing about these experiences, as frightening as they were, there was a message with them. They had some sort of message. If it was a near-death experience and it was hellish, the message usually was, clean your act up. Take a look at yourself. That was the message in the end. Other times, a lot of times people initially when they cross over is that they have a reunion with people who they loved and who loved them. But like I said, we take ourselves to the next experience. So if I'm somebody who is hateful to people and I'm a crook, or I'm not in recovery for my addictions or whatever, and then I have a near-death experience, I might have a hellish experience. That might happen. And those scare people. They're not nearly as popular as the other type of experience. But they do happen. I'm not going to say they don't happen. And so what I try to do is help individuals sort that out to kind of get to, okay, so what is the message here? Why did you have this experience that scared, your pants off, basically? Or if somebody is having one before they pass, these are interesting because sometimes people will start having hellish experiences before they pass. And they're scared. They're really scared. They're scared to go to the other side. And so, and so we do a lot of stuff with imagery and not hypnosis, but some trance stuff, so that they can find what the real message is, what's really going on. And sometimes they will actually have a message in a dream after a hellish experience, or they'll be shown something. So in my experience, every hellish experience has a silver lining.
What exactly are those people experiencing? Like you've described it, but in detail, is it truly devious? Is it devilish? Does it have them screaming in their bed?
It can. Oh yeah, it can. Yeah. If somebody has been really rotten, very rotten. I'm not talking about somebody who, we all make mistakes and we do dumb things, but I'm talking about somebody who has been really, really hateful. What they're confronted with is themselves when they cross over, and they can't hide from it. And if they choose to not evolve, there's this belief that they stay on this one plane of existence. They're on this one level, and as long as they choose to not look at themselves, well, they're just going to stay there. We create our own hell. Nobody does it to us. We do it to ourselves very well. So when they're experiencing this stuff, sometimes they will see, and they will want to run and get out of the bed. But like I said, okay, so this one woman, this German woman, she's a great example. She had been put in a camp. Her father was a big to-do in East Germany. He was like a really big deal. And so he worked with the Nazis, and then he worked with the KGB when things changed. And so she was put in a camp when she was like 12 years old. And she stayed in that camp, and her and her grandmother were eventually released. But she was very bitter. She was a bitter person to the very end. And I liked her. She was one of my good friends. And I would say something to her about, oh, yeah, I'm working on this other book about, deathbed visions. And she'd go, that stuff's ridiculous. Well, her departing visions were her begging for mercy and apologizing. And she was frantic. And so she went on like that for a bit. And then eventually she calmed down because, something happened. Another visitor, something happened. And she knew, and she hadn't even done awful things, but she had just been so bitter. But then something happened. I don't know if she had a positive visitor or what, because by then she was speaking purely German, and my German is horrible. And then she calmed down and she passed peacefully. So it's hard to categorize those specifically into one, this is the way it is, because they do serve a purpose. And in the end, these individuals seem to get some sort of message.
I have a question coming from our audience here. This one from Renee, who is asking, has anyone told you, Carla, that when you go into a room of a dying person, the feeling of the room is different? From a charge of the room, the quietness, like you're in a different void, different smells, like you said. She says, I have felt many a times as an RN and would know this person was close.
Okay. Wow, and see, she's one of the great nurses there because she can pass information on to the family, and she can just share a little bit if they are willing to hear it. Well, yes, there is. There's an energy change, and it is different. So it's kind of like walking into a hospital room, and it can feel very heavy, or it can feel somber, or it can feel, what word shall I use? It feels decisions have been made somehow. And so there's this energy. And then you can walk out into the hall, and it's like totally different energy. And so I think the vibration of the individual does change when they're beginning to cross over to the next world. And sometimes, it can be very light, and it can even be fun. And other times it's just this calmness. Just a real calmness. And she obviously has senses because she can pick up on this, which is incredible to be able to do that. It's really good that she, can say, here's what I experience. Here's what I experience. And so she can say to families, this feeling in the room, do you feel a change in here? And if they say yes, then she can say, I'd like to share some things with you, but it's really up to you. I'm not going to, it's not about religion. It's about what I've witnessed with people who are passing. And if they say yes, she can offer them an awful lot of information. And that can create a ton of peace for the family. I always think it's a privilege to be with someone who is passing. I have seen people struggle, and I have seen people just kind of go with the flow, and they're okay with it, and they're real comfortable, and it's the family that's freaking out. There was this young boy who was preparing to pass, and this is, oh, no, whose is this? This is not my account that I found in my research, but he was preparing to pass, and his parents were praying and begging that he stay, and he was perfectly fine about passing on. He finally told them, I know where I'm going. I'm not scared. And they still kept it up. They prayed and they prayed. And so I think the minister had a dream with a little boy asking him, will you please tell my family to let me go? Can you please tell them that praying for me is not helping anything? Because people will oftentimes, they won't go if we're still begging for them to stay. They're okay about it. But once again, it's about our death-phobic society, and the families don't have any information. So, for me, when I see somebody having a departing vision, it's like a huge relief, because I know that they're going to receive comfort, they're going to receive information, and they will feel like they're not left out on a ledge. So, also, there are times when I will give them information like literature on studies or things of that nature that they can read, or statistics about how many people have these experiences. So this is the most common experience when it comes to death and dying, the departing vision. The most common. So when somebody passes and they're talking to me about it, and then they will start talking about, oh, I saw Mom, she was staring, she was so focused on a corner of the room. And I'll say, that's called the deathbed stare. That there's somebody in the room and she's just really focused in on them. Don't worry about it. She's not going nuts. It's okay. It's a good thing. There aren't that many people around who can say that to people who are passing or moving on, or the family. I mean, it's just like, and it's so frustrating. I get so frustrated. I tried to replicate a study, a major study, that was involved a couple of ethnic groups to compare the experiences. And so I went to a major university, and they were just like, no, we're not doing this. And it would have been so simple. It was just questionnaires for medical people to fill out, and then cross-cultural things. And I mean, I was so angry. I remember I was so angry that they wouldn't, say yes to it. So for this woman who is the nurse, all I want to say is keep doing good work.
Robin has a question for you, and he is asking if you have had or heard of any reports of the angel of death being seen in the hospitals, but coming in different forms.
Well, yeah. I mean, my son saw the angel of death, and it was a kid. He described this kid who had bright red hair and who played with him. And he was very serious about it. I remember we went to our office, and there was a possum, a dead possum. And he said, oh, that possum went to the sky like Daw's going to go. Going to go with us. He was just very clear about it, and then he walked off. And I was left there going, what? But yes, there have been different descriptions of the angel of death. And I do hear some of the scary accounts, but I also hear a lot of positive accounts of this individual coming to assist this person to the afterlife. And they come in different forms. So I know there's the dark angel that everybody talks about, and people are really scared of that. But there are more often forms that are positive. So, yes, I have heard about the dark angel of death.
I know that in my experience with the angel of death, which kicked off my entire run into creating Spaced Out Radio, I didn't fear him at all. I didn't fear him at all. I know what he feels like.
Okay.
But I mean, he really, and I know this may sound weird for a lot of people to hear, but there's a lot of compassion there.
Yes, that's right.
And and even in my channeling session with him, let me explain so that way you understand. On December 13th, 2011, I saw the angel of death in my mother's eyes.
Okay.
And my mother is a 2-time cancer survivor.
Wow.
And everything just kind of, like, time stood still. And then in a split second, my mother shook her head, and her beautiful blue eyes popped back where previously when I was looking into the eyes of the angel of death, they were black with white pupils.
Okay.
And later on that night, a couple of hours later, I actually channeled him. I didn't even know at that point in time, my idea of channeling was literally surfing channels on your remote.
Yeah.
Right. I had no idea what channeling was. And he ended up coming through me and for about 38 minutes, and he told me how to keep my mother alive. And my mother to this day is still alive.
You received a message.
Oh,
that was
it was I wouldn't call it a message. I'd call it more a kick in the ass.
Well, yeah, that too.
Right. But the one thing that I did recall from that is the compassion.
Yeah, okay.
And so do a lot of people feel that compassion, not just from the person dying, but the energy that is there as somebody is supposed to cross over, like Renee had asked.
Yes.
Do family members feel that compassion when it gets close?
They can. It depends on how open they are. If they're real shut down and very rigid and think this sort of stuff is nonsense, that's why kids they can so easily feel it. Because society hasn't invaded hasn't invaded. And so they're pure. Kids are pure. And so they can easily have these encounters. As kids get older and society steps in, I've had these kids come in and some teacher has said, "Oh, don't believe that. That's against God," or some other insane thing. But yes, anytime a relative, a friend, an angel comes through like that, there's going to be the sense in the room of calmness and compassion. And it's going to feel really good.
Is it a loving feeling? Like, how would someone recognize that?
It just feels, how can I explain it? It's like such a, having witnessed it, sometimes it makes me want to cry because I think it's beautiful. Other times I'm just amazed. But there is this sense in the room that the vibration does change when a passing is about to occur. So for you, what you had is a crisis apparition experience, and what that is yes, somebody will come and kick our butts if we are, like doing something we're not supposed to be doing, or we're in trouble, or scared, if we're scared. And all of a sudden, we will have this experience that's kind of overwhelming. For me, it's like a whole team. They show up and they're giving me what for, because I'm not handling something the right way. So that veil is so thin between the living and those in the next world that they're always around us, always. And our duty is to just try to be aware. We're not always going to be, because we have life and we have kids and we have pets and we have bills and jobs and all that stuff. So we're not always going to be attuned. And so if somebody wants to learn how to be more attuned, they can start with finding a way to clear their mind. They don't have to sit down and meditate for, 4 hours, all that stuff. But, just walking around the block or swimming or just closing one's eyes and asking, who's here? That's a good way, to find out what's really going on. Okay, so who's here? It's usually my grandfather, the Scotsman, who will show up and he'll just kind of shake his head. And I know I'm in trouble. But being more attuned, and in that space for you, you're obviously more attuned to your mom and what was going on. And so you were able to pick up on what it was, the message that you needed to receive to help her.
Well, it was definitely a kick in the ass, that's for sure. I'm not going to lie about that, because it set off a whole tangent of weird and strange that ended up to the start of this show.
Okay.
People who are at that point where they are ready to cross over and they feel it's time, do they ever get any weird, strange occurrences or encounters when that happens? Let's say someone claims that they are an ET contactee throughout their lives. Will any extraterrestrials come on in?
I have a friend who's researched that, and he has talked about how there have been those accounts. I haven't really investigated that very much, but when I have an account like that, I always call my friend in North Carolina, and he has answers. And so he talks about how, in essence, these individuals they're spirit beings. They're just spirit beings. I know people have bad experiences with abduction, but for the most part, he says that they're just spirit beings, and they've probably been with you all your life, and so now it's time. And so they're the ones that are going to be there to help you, escort you, and make you comfortable. So, I mean, I think it's something that really needs to be looked into, because I think that if somebody is in a place where they have had those experiences during their life and they have made peace with it in some way and they're comfortable, and these beings are even part of their spirit team, it would be natural for them to show up at the end of life. That makes perfect sense to me, but I had to have it explained to me.
What about pets? What if you've had pets that have crossed over?
Well, there was this cat named Sweetie Pie that we had. She was just this mangy old cat. She showed up after a hurricane, and so we took her in. And she would yowl and growl, but she was so grateful to be with us. And I had to put her down myself because the vets were closed, and it was 4 a.m, and I knew she was getting ready to pass. And so what I did is I mixed up some herbs, and so she could quietly move on. Well, at the moment that she moved, past, my husband says he saw a light leave the bathroom, because that's where she was, and go towards the door and go through the door. Now, there were no lights on the street. There were no lights from cars, nothing. And so we don't know if it was her former owner coming to get her. We don't know. But we have seen things like that with pets. Now, I had this one person say to me, don't put anything in your books about pets in the afterlife because you'll sound like a wacko. And I thought, well, I already think I'm a wacko, so I put a whole chapter in one of my books. And some of these experiences people had, my mother-in-law, perfect example, she was eating lunch, and it was about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and she looked up at the clock, and she noticed that, and then she went back to her lunch. Then she felt this brush of fur, and like her dog would get, brush on her leg, and she looked down, and the dog wasn't there. Well, my father-in-law had taken the dog to the vet, and the decision was made to put the dog down because there was so much cancer. So she had a deathbed experience, departing vision with her pup. So, a lot of people don't think that animals have a spirit of sort, and they do. They have a spirit of sort. And so I know people at times, they'll feel embarrassed to talk about that they even saw their kitty passed away, and then they saw their kitty. Or they'll catch a glimpse of one of their pets running across the room. Or they'll hear a meow, or they'll hear a bark, or they'll feel a lick on, from an animal. But I think it's something that's really hard for society to really embrace. But it's something that I find fascinating because I really love my pets. So, yes.
That is sweet, because I think for all of us, we fall in love with our animals. They become part of our family. So to know that if they've passed on and they're going to be on the other side waiting for us, that is pretty special. We only got about 5 minutes here before we have to go to break, and I wanted to ask you, in regards to deathbed visions, is it the same as a near-death experience, or are they completely different?
Here's the deal. When somebody has a departing vision near-death experience, it's something that it's so common and it's so consistent, and the outcome is so pleasant usually, that with that experience, there is just this sense that everything will be okay. And the person is going to die, okay? The person is not coming back. The person is going to die. And it's all about how the person is dying, who's there to escort them. Don't give them food, force feed them with food. Any nurses listening will understand that, because it keeps one from passing. Now, when you have a near-death experience, that's a whole different animal, because it has some of the consistencies of a departing vision, but the people come back. They come back. They're alive. And so people have those experiences. I had one of those when I was really sick. And so, basically, I came back. I wasn't going anywhere. And I got a couple of messages from it. But they're different animals. One is about, seeing that death really isn't the enemy, the near-death experience, getting messages, being told you need to go back to your family, or your husband needs some help, or some kind of message, or, everything's going to be okay. You go through the tunnel, and there's your grandmother on the other side, and she hugs you and says, it's going to be okay. Or having an after-death experience, where after a passing, you get the feather or the penny or the dime, or somebody comes to you in a dream and it feels so real. It's like color. That's a little different too. But a departing vision is, oh my gosh, this person is going to pass. And this person knows they're going to pass, and they know it's okay, and they've made peace. Oh my gosh. And they've even told me it's going to be okay. So it's like with the near-death experience, it's not final. With the departing vision, it's a final thing.
But are they seeing the same thing? Because people who have NDEs are seeing a light. They are seeing people who have crossed over. They're usually, in some instances, see a landscape or beautiful clouds and a sun shining down on them. It's usually a very blissful type photograph that they are seeing.
Well, and then they get kicked out. And they're told, no, go back. It's just a very different experience. They still have to live. They still have lessons they're supposed to learn. And from the experience, they learn about some of the lessons that they need to embrace. And not everybody sees a light. Not everybody goes through a tunnel. So there are lots and lots of near-death experiences that there is consistency with the researchers I know about the telltale signs of a near-death experience. But the person goes back. He comes home. She comes home. But in this situation, it's not like that. It's not about receiving a message for how I'm going to improve my life, like a hellish NDE. It's about, okay, you're going to really cross over. We're going to help you. Your family will be fine. You will be loved. It's very different.
We only have about a minute and a half here before we have to go to break. Where does reincarnation play in all of this?
Well, reincarnation can be found in every culture. Even in the Jewish culture, reincarnation is a big deal and was a big deal. And the belief is that we don't just cross over and all of a sudden we've done the deal. everything's okay, but that we have more lessons to learn, and that we even have a choice if we want to do that or not. Do we want to be a guide? I'm getting really out there now, but do we want to be a guide? Do we want to help those that we left? Do we want to return to do that? Do we want to be a spirit team member and just be there and watch over? What job do we want to do? What do we want to do? So in essence, the person who crosses over meets with their spirit team, and they discuss what it is he or she is going to do next. And so, I mean, so many people, it just drives me nuts when they start talking about, oh, when I die, it's going to be so great, and I'm going to be like wear a fluffy gown, and it's going to be wonderful, and that's kind of scary too, because I've had people say, I don't want to be on a cloud with a violin. I don't want that. And so they're very relieved when they hear it's not about that. So
I just want to be fishing.
I want to be
fishing with really good music playing.
There you go. There you go.
That's my vision. That is totally my vision. Carla, I'm going to get you to hold on here. Dr. Carla Wills-Brandon is our guest tonight on Spaced Out Radio. Deathbed Visions is our topic tonight. We know we got a couple of questions in the audience. We will get to those questions here momentarily. But first, we're going to skip out for our final break of the night with Dr. Carla Wills-Brandon on Spaced Out Radio.
Are you tired of being blocked, shadow banned, or placed in jail for simply posting your thoughts on social media? Social Media Freedom can take care of that for you. Social Media Freedom is the newest and one of the best free new apps that allows you the freedom to post what you want, when you want. It takes seconds to download from your app store. Come join the tribe at Social Media Freedom. It's time to set yourself free.
The first annual Caribou Paracon is happening September 28th to 30th in the 108 Mile Ranch, British Columbia. Brought to you by the Canadian Society of Questers and Spaced Out Radio. Come listen to our featured speaker, Grant Cameron, along with Elizabeth Anglin, Paisley Town, Mike Moran, Eric Cooper, and more. It's a 3-day supernatural adventure at the Spruce Hills Resort and Spa. Tickets for the weekend are $150 Canadian. The Caribou Paracon, celebrating everything paranormal.
A timepiece is a reflection of who you are, and what better way to show off the real you than with an Escape watch? Escape is a lifestyle brand accessorizing your days and nights. Choose to escape and create the life of discovery that you deserve. Dream, play, unite with your own personalized Escape watch. Head to escapewatches.com. There is no time like the present to enjoy your escape. Use promo code SMF2017 for your 20% discount today.
Looking for a place to advertise at a very reasonable cost? Look no further than Spaced Out Radio. SpacedOutRadio.com has an advertising tab that you can click to check out our daily, weekly, and monthly packages to play on the radio, or our website including social media. From commercial spots to banners, we have it all. Check out our competitive pricing today.
Find yourself constantly looking up in the sky, looking for answers? Have you had extraterrestrial contact? Are you an abductee? Looking for answers to your experiences? Hi there, I'm R. Keith Andrews, Spaced Out Radio's resident ET expert. Join me live the first Friday of every month where I take questions from the Spaced Out Radio chat room and help you understand those from the far-off world. It's 2 hours of knowledge every experiencer should listen to. Hope to see you there.
Are you intrigued by Paranormal Talk Radio? You'll love the new Paranormal Radio app from TalkStream Live. You'll find a great selection of talk shows covering UFOs, ghosts, strange phenomena, and much more. Download the Paranormal Radio app now and start listening to the very best in paranormal talk entertainment, including the network you're listening to right now. The Paranormal Radio app, free in Google Play and the iOS App Store.
The Call of the Wild is in Vancouver. The Moose Vancouver is one of the hottest bars and restaurants in the city. Open until 2 a.m. nightly, the Moose will rock you like a hurricane all night long. Great food with everything on the menu at $6.95 near the corner of Nelson and Granville. Get your horns up and come rock with us. The Moose Vancouver, the official rocking bar of Spaced Out Radio.
Are you an experiencer? Have you had run-ins with strange creatures you can't explain? ETs, Dogman, Bigfoot, werewolves? They're enough to scare the daylights out of anyone. Hi there, I'm Butch Witkowski from your Cop. And on the last Monday of every month, you can listen to me and the host, Dave Scott, talk about the weird and the strange being reported on Spaced Out Radio. I'm going to bring my investigations and sources, you bring your experiences, and we'll figure out the rest together. Strange Days on Spaced Out Radio. Come tune us in at spacedoutradio.com.
You hear footsteps in the empty room above you. A rocking chair begins rocking by itself. Don't be afraid of the things that go bump in the night. Reach for Spirit Storybox, the iPhone app the Huffington Post UK called the only ghost hunting app you will ever need. Spirit Storybox. The spirits are telling their stories. Are you listening?
You know, it's hard being the bad man of ufology, but that's just the way that I like it. This is Chris George Zuger, and I'll be hanging out with Dave Scott and SOR scientist Chris Cogswell for Reality Paranormal, the second Wednesday of every month. And our job is to break it down and come to conclusions as to what is really going on in the supernatural world. I'd love for you to join us and bring your questions for us to investigate right here on Spaced Out Radio.
Visit purpleplates.com today. For over 40 years, the Purple Energy Plates have been delivering amazing results for their many customers. Inspired by the great genius Nikola Tesla, the harmony, healing, and energetic effects of the plates have proven over and over to be beneficial and often miraculous to thousands of customers. Check their site for daily specials and choose from their many energy products. You won't be sorry. Visit them today at purpleplates.com.
When it comes to the news, we look for the stories that the mainstream won't cover. Welcome to Spaced Out Radio's The Encounter. This is News Director Everett Thiemer. The Encounter is about the weird and strange stories that occur daily, and we scour the world looking to bring them to you. You can hear me with Dave Scott every Monday through Friday in our Encounter news segment. Read us online at spacedoutradio.com or check us out and give our Facebook page a like at SOR The Encounter. So come give The Encounter a read.
From the mile-high state of Colorado, sharing our signal around the world, I invite you to Spaced Out Sundays. Hi, I'm Tessa Nicole Thomas, and I'm closing out the week by taking you on a paranormal journey to the world of the weird. Ghosts, aliens, psychic phenomena, I will hit it all in your questions too. So let us highlight the paranormal for you. So come join me for Spaced Out Sundays starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, 12 a.m. Eastern, only at spacedoutradio.com.
The views and opinions expressed by tonight's guest and topic of discussion do not necessarily represent the official policy or position of Spaced Out Radio, Spaced Out Weekend, Spaced Out Radio Limited, its hosts, syndicated carriers, or anyone associated with this broadcast. You're listening to Spaced Out Radio with Dave Scott. Follow Dave on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio and hashtag Spaced Out Radio, and on Facebook, Spaced Out Radio Show. Now, back to the program.
Welcome back to the third and final hour of Spaced Out Radio tonight. I am your host, Dave Scott. Thank you so much for being with us. Tomorrow night, we talk about premonitions. Our guest tomorrow will be Lori Moon Boggs. So make sure you tune in at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern at spacedoutradio.com. We say hello to everyone listening in on the SOR Radio Network and Deep Talk Radio. And don't forget, you can check out our archives for free at youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. Do me a favor, hit that subscribe button. Bill Cardwell has set the password for tonight in the SOR Space Travelers Club. Steganov Thalmata. Steganov Thalmata is your password. Make sure you use it wisely, Space Travelers, as Bill sets the password each and every night right here on the mighty SOR. Our website is spacedoutradio.com, where we have a plethora of features for you. You can rock out to Bumblefoot, shop at our store, read up on the Encounter online, and so much more. And don't forget, tickets are officially on sale for the September 28th through 30th. You only got a month for the first annual Caribou Paracon up here in beautiful 108 Mile Ranch, British Columbia at the Spruce Hill Resort and Spa, presented by Spaced Out Radio and the Canadian Society of Questers. Go to questers.ca, click on the fall conference. We want to see you here. For the final time tonight, we introduce our guest, Dr. Carla Wills-Brandon, and she has been studying for the last number of years, about a decade now, of deathbed visions. Now, right before the break, we were talking to Dr. Wills-Brandon about reincarnation. And Dr. Carla, thank you so much for being with us again tonight. It's so appreciative.
Thanks. I've been doing this for 30 years.
Oh, I thought it was only 10. I apologize.
No, 30 years. But 10 makes me seem so much younger. So it has its pluses.
10 works for me. 10 works for me. We can go with that.
Yeah. Okay, the thing about reincarnation is that it goes way, way back. In the Christian religion, they took it out. You know, they had it in the first manuscripts. The thought is that there were many people who put together the Old Testament and then the New Testament, and that and then people started fighting. The writers started fighting, and also people were having problems with. They didn't, it was like people wanted to be the main author. So I know they kicked out. Mary Magdalene had a whole chapter, and that went, adioso. But they did. They had a chapter or a bit written, not a bit, but quite a bit, on reincarnation, and it was very accepted. And then when some of the Roman emperors came along, what happened was they changed the whole thing. They changed the whole concept of what had been written. And one of the first things they did was kick out reincarnation, which I don't understand that to this day. And I've read some of the lost books, lost manuscripts. And even in the, this one historical, it's not even historical, it's an ancient piece of literature. There's talk about reincarnation. So it's always been there, but nobody talks about it. And for me, I believe I have talked to people who have had the most specific experiences with reincarnation. And they have known that they have just come from another life and that they're here to do something different. And they're just very, very secure in that. And, of course, people will say things. There are people who will be interested. I had this experience, and I have to tell you something, too, Dave. You were talking about experience with your mom. When we have one experience, it usually opens the door for many more. That's not uncommon at all. All of a sudden, all of these, phenomena begin, or we start sensing things, or seeing things, or even hearing things, and seeing things. And so the original event opens all of that up. And then people can feel very overwhelmed when that happens. They don't know what to do. And God forbid they should, meet up with somebody who calls themselves a teacher who is damaging. And that happens all the time. And so for people out there who are listening to this, if you have had experiences like this, premonitions of things to come, or people who are passing, or after-death experiences where you've had the sensation that a loved one was with you, or you had a dream of your loved one coming to say everything's okay, or a near-death experience. If you have had any of these experiences, it's very important to do some research. You can research literature and make sure that the people you're researching seem like they kind of know what they're doing. Otherwise, that's just going to be really confusing for you. So so I was in London again. I was going to do another workshop, and I had this feeling of possession to find this Knights Templar church, which is near the Thames River, Thames River, And so I was like hysterical. I didn't know why I had to find it. And when I got there, they don't have bodies buried in this temple, but they have like the topping of a Bible, what it would look like. And these have been here for, a very, very long time. But I went to one of them and I said, I think I know who this is. And I feel like I was with this person. I think the priest thought I was nuts. But, that's my only experience with it. But I know people who have had some really incredible experiences, little kids, as I said once before, who are they haven't been damaged by societal beliefs. And so they'll start talking about how they were so-and-so way back when, or they knew this person here, and but those people they've passed already, but they say they knew them in another life. One of my, Haraldson, Erlinger Haraldson, has done, this guy has a crack up. He's in his late 80s, but he goes over to India and he researches reincarnation events. He was also one of the major researchers into deathbed visions in the 60s and 70s. But he goes and he takes these accounts and he catalogs them, and he finds them very, very fascinating. But the thing is that that's not as popular today as even a near-death experience. It's much easier to talk about a near-death experience than reincarnation. That's seen as woo-woo. And even though it's in most religions at one time or another. And so when people ask me about that, what I tell them is have an open mind, read some of the historical information on reincarnation. Yeah, I trust the historical information much more than the modern day stuff. I don't have to deal with somebody who's trying to be a superstar. I get to deal with somebody who really had a real passion for investigating a phenomena. Another guy who's really interesting, he passed away at 111 years old. He was a Holocaust survivor and he was a chemist. And I thought he was a real trip. He studied reincarnation and phenomenon like departing visions. And he tried to tell his chemistry friends, peers, about this stuff, and they just blew him off. So all he did was just research it more. And so, it's like a choice. That's what I keep getting over and over again. It's some sort of choice that there are different paths that people can pass, that people can follow once they cross over.
Let's move on a little bit here, because I have a question from Boo Boo in the audience. And she is asking, do you think pets know when a person is dying?
I think so. I definitely think so. She needs to Google cats who go into a patient's room and lay on the patient when that patient is going to die. Just Google that. But yes, I definitely think, pets, they have intuition. And so if someone is very, very sad, what happens is they know it. If somebody they have pets who can actually sense cancer when somebody has cancer and when they're really close to passing. So it's a very interesting thing. I mean, there's that one cat who just lives in there. And so as soon as the cat goes and lays on the person, the staff knows that person's time is coming. So I find that really fascinating and interesting. But, of course, you can't talk about that. No, we do in our circle.
When is this, and that brings up a good question, when is this going to be not such a taboo subject? What would have to happen to change the minds of, watching cats who can detect cancer in people, or watching animals, like they'll bring dogs in or wherever, that will lie on the patient's bed when it gets ready, the person gets ready to pass, and the animal just lays there and snuggles up and stares at them. We've all seen those videos and everything. When does this topic not become so taboo?
Well, I think that there are more and more people. There's a friend of mine who died a gruesome death about 3 weeks ago. And there was this little dog that loved her to pieces. and that little dog still sits at the door and feels very sad. So, I had a pair of lovebirds who both passed at the same time. So there are these things that go on with animals that we could learn something from. Because I think the naysayers, they have more of a stage, to be honest. They're more, because I know some of these people who make tons and tons of money by being naysayers. Now, I think skepticism is a healthy thing. A little bit is a healthy thing. It keeps us from getting hurt or, buying the whole kit and caboodle, and it makes us do our own research. But I think that, with situations like this, the problem is that they have the stage, so to speak. They have the stage. And so, like even in Wikipedia, somebody wrote something about me that was so awful, and it was so misconstrued. I was like on fire. I got in touch with Wikipedia. They didn't want to do anything. So you have a large group of people, a very large group of people who are making a lot of money on fighting against this stuff. And they have said some things about people I know very well who have done really good work in this area and made them out to look even more foolish than they did with me. Because it's all about money. It's about, the airtime on TV and being heard and seen, and the bottom line is money. And I think that if we can get to a place where we all realize this and understand that, something's really weird here. This doesn't seem right. There's too many people who are talking about departing visions or near-death experiences or after-death communication. It seems like there's a lot of people that talk about that. And so here's this large group, and then you have this other group of these people who are so skeptical, and what they do is they run the person down, they get any kind of dirt they can on them, they publish it, they do all sorts of things. And so I think that it's going to take some time. Also, in this age, there are a lot of young people who have, they don't want to have anything to do with spirituality. They don't. And they're more about being a humanitarian. And so what that does is that they're not going to have interest in this stuff. I mean, most of the people who follow me usually are people who are middle-aged or older. Once in a while, a young person comes along. Once in a while. And it's such a thrill, too, because my message to them is, go tell your generation about this. Because experience took care of that fear of death. And so it's just going to take maybe a generation or two. With me, with my boys, they just call me kooky. But my youngest son has mediumistic ability. And so I don't talk about it with him much because he says, I know it's there, I just don't want to deal with it right now. Because he's too busy tearing up the streets and being a guy and, doing all that stuff. So he doesn't want to talk about that or get into that. And that's normal.
I don't blame him.
Yeah. He wants to go, hang out and have fun and play computer games and that kind of stuff, so mom is weird. And also, kids also go through the separation thing where they have to hate everything their parents like or into. Even if they like the music, they're going to say they hate it. So if a parent is exploring life after death, and even if they have had, both of my boys have had experiences, they're like, oh, I'm not going to look at that right now. That's part of their separating from us. So that's why I just leave it alone with my boys. So they like to tell me they are atheists because they think that's going to get me really upset. And I really don't care. So sometimes I will play along and go, oh my goodness. But usually I just don't say anything. But I do think it's, their generation and their kids' generation that are going to bring about spiritual evolution that doesn't have much to do with religion at all. Religion is just a pathway. That's all it is. It gets, there are rituals in religion that help people focus. Prayers can actually put people in a trance state. Prayers to, having some sort of foundation is not a bad thing. But if they are exposed to, I work with a lot of people who have been exposed to really, really abusive, raunchy religious things, and they've been very damaged by this. And they have to go through the process of being really, just like Holocaust survivors, they have to get really angry about what happened to them and about the abuses they've experienced, and why didn't God come and save them, and why did God let them be molested or yelled at or screamed at or any other sort of abuse. So they have to go through that, and then they have to go through sadness, and then they become atheists. They all become atheists, which is that's a good thing, because feeling like an atheist, that's about moving on up the ladder toward finding out one's own specific sense of spirituality, where they, yes. So they're atheists for a while, and they kind of walk around. It's fun to be atheists and all this stuff. When they come to my office and they're atheists, that's when I will say to them, do you think that it's a possibility that your relationship with some form of religion left you scarred? And then they'll start, spilling their guts. I used to work with people who had been abused by cults. Not cults like occult cults, but cults, like religious stuff, like maybe just the hellfire and damnation. I mean, some of that stuff, who they, that's what they grew up with, and that's what they think it is. And so you have these people, these adults who are, spewing this stuff all the time, and these kids are scared to death, and so they do what they're supposed to do because they don't want to go to hell. And so for them, they're scarred and they're scared. And so once they get away from these groups, they become atheists, a lot of them. And then you have some who will try a lot of religions, different religions. So what happens in the end, hopefully, is that they can take what they like and leave the rest. That they don't have to follow that specific religion. That they can develop something, or they can have a relationship with a higher power, or a sense of God, or a universal creator, or an energy force, or whatever works for them.
I do have to ask, what about atheist people or agnostic people, people who have no belief in anything on the other side? How do they change the minute they start having some sort of deathbed vision?
Oh, wow, it really rocks their world. That's what it does, because it doesn't fit with, atheism and agnostic, people who are agnostic, they are following a religious philosophy. They are following a philosophy with rules, and you can't think outside this box. It's just like, somebody who's an extremist in some form of religion. It's the exact same thing. And so when, some spiritual experience comes along, it doesn't fit. It doesn't fit anymore. And so they'll try to ignore it, but it's really hard to ignore because the experience has imprinted on them. Sometimes they will think they're nuts, and a lot of times what they do is they keep that to themselves until they, maybe see somebody like you or me, or they watch some show where there's somebody who talks about this sort of stuff. But they, it does. They have to as Elie Wiesel said, he had to reevaluate his relationship with God. That the God of his youth didn't work anymore. And then he said, it wasn't God that killed all of us. It was the Nazis that killed us. This is not about God. And he said, I can now define my sense of God. And when people get to that place, they're more open-minded, and their sense of spirituality changes. It will change. They don't have to stay in the box. They can be outside the box. And if they hear something really interesting, reincarnation, that sounds kind of curious. I might want to look into that. And, okay, so I looked into that. Now I'm going to look into, I'm going to look into some religion, mysticism, that the mystical base of some religion. Okay, so I looked at that. Wow, that has some stuff in it that kind of like sounds like when I was studying reincarnation. There's some similarities there. That's strange. But it's a journey. It's a journey. And so I can tell you that my concepts have changed dramatically over the years, and they'll continue to change. So,
but with people who are, say, disbelievers in absolutely anything, how does their transition work when all of a sudden they have this aha moment? I guess there is something on the other side.
Yeah, they get real confused. They get very confused. And so they really don't know how to deal with that. And so, deep in their soul, intuitively, they know that was real. But the dogma of what they have been around for so long interferes with that. And so what that does, it's kind of hard to kickstart a spiritual journey when you're dealing with that dogma, no matter what the dogma is, because that dogma has been so ingrained. So, yeah, it's kind of like, wow, what was this? And do we really survive death? And, some of the reasons I've heard for people being agnostic or atheists are just they're beyond the pale. It's like, really? That's why you're practicing these other philosophies? They sound just like those people who are religiously extreme. But it rocks their world. And so they will quietly, the internet is a great thing. You can anonymously, you can look at stuff and nobody has to know. And so they will start investigating very quietly because they will want to find out what just happened to them because they want a name for it. And they want to see if they're crazy or not. And so slowly, over time, that stage is called the gathering stage. When somebody gets a big aha moment, and it doesn't fit with their reality, their current reality. So what they have to do is they have to go out there and learn. They have to find some information. So people who are like that, and I've met a lot of them, and like I said, my father-in-law was an agnostic communist. And he finally, it's like it wasn't until his death that he had a sense of, wow, we don't die. Something else is going on here. So, yeah, as did my mother-in-law. As probably will my father.
We are down to our last 2.5 minutes with you tonight, and this is a show that is completely flown on by, and I want to say thank you so much for coming on Spaced Out Radio and doing this with us. Where can people find your research and what you're up to? Because, as people have that entire fear of death, myself included, we're always looking for places to research. We don't want to get into a long book. Maybe we don't have time for a long book. So where could you point us in your research to go find more information?
Well, they can come to my website. There is research on near-death experiences put out by the Association for Near-Death Experiences. And you can go there and you can get a quick read on all sorts of stuff. It's fairly easy. You can just put my name in your search engine, and there will be information that will pop up that has to do with this stuff. But if you Google, if you could Google somebody like Erlinger Haraldson, that's going to be real true stuff. If you research somebody like Kenneth Ring, that's going to be real research. Or Jeffrey Long, that's real research, and so that's where I would go. My books are very personable, and they're not. They're not. I can't stand a book that's so thick. I don't like that. So they're very friendly. The reading is friendly. But if you check out one of these investigators, what happens is it's a lead for other people to check out too. So there's, let's see, oh gosh, I can't remember these. I'm getting too old. I can't remember all these people's names. But if you were to, or Peter Fenwick in England, he's another one. He's a great researcher. And he's researched afterlife experiences also, so including departing visions. So, just those few names that I've given you, are good places to start. Those are superior researchers.
Wonderful. Dr. Carla Wills-Brandon, thank you so much for coming on Spaced Out Radio tonight. Very much appreciate your time.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. This was fun.
It's been a lot of fun. You hold on. We're going to get to the encounter with Everett Thiemer from the SOR, the Encounter News Center, right now.
This is the winter of our lives. We come to play the final scene. The curtains closing in the darkness we expose what lies beneath.
It is time once again for the encounter as we enter the encounter tonight with Everett Thiemer, taking a look around the world at the news of the day. The news is always changing, and that's why we bring you the encounter for the final half hour of the show. Don't forget you can find it on Facebook.com/SOR The Encounter as we are redoing our website. Give it a like if you don't mind. Mr. Thiemer, what is up in Team Stumpland?
Oh, there is so much going on in the world of Stump, isn't there?
It's beautiful, isn't it? It's just beautiful.
Some days it is just wonderful to be awake.
So what do you think about these deathbed confessions? Not confessions, sorry. Visions that people are having. Do you buy them? Do you think it's just imagination as the body starts to shut down? What do you think it is?
I really don't know. I can see it being either way. I mean, there is the idea of the chemical and neurological happenings of the brain as it shuts down, but I like to believe there's more than that.
I don't know. I'd like to believe there is more than that as well, but... And just to answer Michael McNeil's question, no, Dave did not whisper anything there. But nonetheless, maybe we're hearing things. Maybe our ghost in the studio has come back. I really don't know.
Don't say that. Let's not start that.
Oh, man. I haven't seen any orbs in here or any weird energy in a while. Maybe it's time. Maybe they're prepping for another Carl visit.
You keep them this time.
I'll try. Yeah, I hope that there's something. I mean, my personal belief is that there is. And I've had a few weird experiences, as you know, that kind of lead me that way, but I still get the anxiety about it. Still do, even though I know I don't have to worry about it.
I personally believe there's more. Otherwise, everything or so much of what we're doing in the paranormal means nothing. And experiences that people are having are nothing, and I think it's bigger than that. I believe there's more. There has to be more.
I agree with you, and welcome in late there, Goddess Michelle, and hi Bob. Goddess Michelle on Twitter at #SpacedOutRadio. Hi Bob in our Spreaker room. Love you, bro. Bob, of course, the golden voice of Spaced Out Radio, who introduces me every night.
He has some lovely tones, doesn't he?
Oh, they are dulcet. They are dulcet. Let's get to the news, my friend.
Well, there's a book called The Liberation Code, written by this author, C.J. Awell. And Amazon.com has banned it, dropped it from its place on their virtual shelves, so to speak. And it started a uproar over free speech again. This book has the code in it to print 3D printed handguns. It's a gun called the Liberator. And the author of the book is saying that because code is speech is free, the book should not be banned. And people on Twitter and social media are pointing out that they carry the Alchemist Handbook. Amazon carries other various controversial topics and subjects. And they're arguing that this is free speech and that Amazon does not have the right to ban the book on their platform, even though it is a self-published through Amazon Kindle product.
You know what? If you have books that have recipes to make dirty bombs or something along those lines and other controversial type potential weaponry, this should be allowed. This should completely be allowed. But I understand where they're going with it. All right?
Well,
I mean, I think everybody is trying to do their part to try and curb gun violence one way or another.
Well, there's a little bit of a twist in this because this gentleman, Cody Wilson, who he founded a gun rights organization called Defense Distributed. He had originally posted these plans on his website, and the Department of Defense sent him a cease and desist letter to force him to remove this code from his website. So it was taken down, and then it was written into this book, and it was published or began the publishing process, and the Department of Justice did receive an injunction banning the book from being published. So it was banned from being published, but he did get it up on Amazon for a while, and they pulled it, banned it because of what they deem as content beyond their terms of service. And, now the Department of Defense has the injunction. They've pulled it, and everybody is claiming that this is an infringement on both his First and Second Amendment rights.
I got one here for you. I know you're kind of surprised by this one, but I'm curious your thoughts. Hockey Canada, Hockey Ontario has made it mandatory now for its coaches, managers, players, and trainer to go through gender identity and gender expression in dressing room policies now for their team. All because a human rights violation was filed in 2013 by a transgender teen and the family. And if you refuse to take the gender course, you will no longer be allowed to coach in Ontario minor hockey.
Well, I think if you want to be part of the Ontario minor hockey system, you have to abide by their rules. And, obviously there were some situations that came up that... Okay. There was one situation that came up that the organization believes needs to be addressed. And if, the bottom line is if you want to be part of their organization, you need to follow their rules. If you don't want to follow their rules, you're free to not be part of their organization.
Now, normally, I would agree with that, okay? And I want to preface this. I have a beautiful human being who is transgender on my team, on my Spaced Out Radio team. Who it is does not matter. All right? I am very proud of this person because they do extremely good work for us. And if this person feels or identifies with another sex, I have no problem with that. Now, the way hockey, and I'm sure other sports has always worked, at least in this country, is if, let's say, you had a girl who wanted to play on a boys' team, there would be a separate change room made available for that young lady to get changed because, obviously, if you're 13, 14 years old and you can't have a bunch of horny young boys staring at a girl getting changed. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, that's just logic. It's logic.
I understand that.
All right. What is wrong with having a gender-neutral dressing room?
I don't know.
And this is the issue. I have no problem with anybody of any gender playing sports. I think the problem with society is we don't have enough kids playing sports anymore, or taking band, or going, into scouts or anything like that. Too much video games, and I'm not blaming video games for violence or anything like that, but too much of everything. All right, too much lonerhood. We don't allow kids to get dirty anymore or play hide and go seek in the dusk of the evening. We just don't allow that. That's taboo now compared to when we were all kids. And I just look at this and I think this is I don't want to say an ignorant rule, all right? But there was already a system in place. And you know what? When it comes to sports, I have there's a real fine line between what is bullying and what is just, how do you put it? Trying to get an upper hand.
Well, let me ask you this. The person involved in this incident, is it somebody who identifies as a male or somebody who identifies as a female?
Jesse Thompson, transgender player, got the ball rolling. It doesn't say if, let me quickly read here. It was 17 at the time, felt being forced by a league official to change in a separate dressing room during 2012-13, outed him and exposed him to harassment and bullying. So probably this Jesse Thompson was a girl, wanted to change because she identified it as a boy, wanted to change in the boys' dressing room. Was not allowed because biologically she or he is a she.
I can see, you know what, if I were a 14-year-old or 12-year-old boy, I don't know that I would want to be changing in front of a young girl either. And in some respects, at that age, many of them may not be mature enough to understand the situation and would just feel like they're undressing in front of a girl. And I can see how that would make somebody uncomfortable.
Yeah. I mean, at some point, like I said, if she identifies as a he, fantastic. Great. If that's what you feel you want to do as a human being, please go for it. There's plenty of room for acceptance for everybody. All right. But when it comes to dressing rooms, they weren't saying you're not a part of the team because you're trans. They were saying you have to change in a different room because a lot of the boys don't understand.
And I can understand that. Maybe I would assume that many of these boys knew him or her and as a her and were used to her being her, whether it be because she was supposed to, that's the imposed standard, so to speak. So I can understand the younger kids, the younger boys being uncomfortable or upset.
You know what, though? Here's the thing. And I think we think because it's a boys' team that everything should bend. All the rules should bend. Let's reverse it. Let's say it was a boy that was transitioning into a girl or identified as a girl going into a girl's change room to get changed. But let's just say, hypothetically, he hadn't had the sex change yet. Is that allowable?
I don't know. That sounds like the plot of several 80s movies.
You know what happens at 16, 17-year-old dressing rooms? Okay? You shower. So after the game, all right, and it works in football, baseball, not so much baseball, but, usually basketball, indoor sports, football, hockey. After the game, when you're all sweaty or after your practice, you gear down and you go hop in the shower, which is built into the dressing room. How would, if this was a girls' team and there was a boy identifying as a girl, how would you feel as a parent if she hopped in the shower with your daughters?
You know what? Right off the bat, I kind of feel like I know that I would have a double standard.
Exactly.
I'm not sure. I feel bad for saying this, but I'm not sure I'm entirely comfortable with that.
And that's the thing is, it's always about, and trust me when I say this, and I'm going to preface this for anybody tuning in late again, I am a huge supporter of anybody wanting to be whatever they want. All right? I have my best friends who are gay. I have people on my team and friends on my team who are transgender. My business associate, my investor, he's of a different culture. All right? I am the least racist guy here. And I know that's easy for everybody to say, oh, everybody says that. But here's the thing. It always starts with the male dressing room or the male gym or the male everything. I don't give a care about color. I'm not talking color right now. All right? If this role was reversed, and let's say my son wanted to be a woman, which I would not have a problem with whatsoever, and he wanted to get changed and shower in a female dressing room because he identified as a woman or a girl, yet he still had a penis, what would be the fallout on that? This is what pisses me off.
You know, I don't know the specifics, but I do know that there have been cases of that. And sadly, I believe that several, if I'm correct, several of the cases resulted in quite a bit of bullying.
It is not the sports coach's position. All right? It is not the sports coach's position to be teaching gender equality. That is for the parents. Okay? The coach is only there to teach the game, for the love of the game. I don't care what gender you are. The child is there because they love the game. And God bless them for doing that, because there are so many kids these days who don't want to get away from their Xbox.
It's a PS4 now.
Or whatever it is. PS4 or whatever. Shows you how out of touch with video games I am. But it makes no sense, man. And when are we going to start thinking sensibly instead of insensitively about this topic? I remember I had a couple of gay clients come in one day. All right, to my old work, what I did previous. And one of them actually said to me, "Are you uncomfortable that we're a couple?" And I said, "Absolutely not." Right? And somehow we transitioned into the conversation about the Pride Parade, and they're like, "Oh, we don't do the Pride Parade." And I said, "Why not?" They said, we're proud to be gay, but assless chaps are not what we're about. The one guy was an airline pilot. The other one was another professional executive. All right? They were proud to be gay, but they were not proud of the way that things like the Pride Parade stigmatized people and people who didn't believe or understand. And we...
Well,
Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
No, and I was just going to say, we're so sensitive about having to react immediately now. Coaches are not there. Okay? Coaches are not there for sexual orientation. They are there to teach a game, teach discipline, teach the love of sport. I got a real problem with this. Real problem.
But isn't teaching the game and teaching the love of sport sort of part of the ideal of teaching the overall idea of respect? I mean, you battle somebody on the court or the field, but after the game, you guys walk away respecting each other.
Absolutely.
For the battle.
Exactly. You know what? After every game in minor hockey, we had to shake hands with the other team. All right? And you go down the line, good game. But between that 60 minutes of when the puck dropped to when the final buzzer ended, I didn't care what I called anybody. That was part of the game. Trash talking is part of sport. Now, I realize there's a fine line there, okay? There are stupid names that shouldn't be called. Especially in today's day and age as we have matured as society. There's no reason to call someone faggot or anything like that. Right?
But isn't the sport field, or whatever the sport may be, basketball, hockey, baseball, if the idea or part of that sport is the teaching of respect, don't you think that this does play in a little bit?
Not when it comes to sport. I have no problem with teaching it in schools. No problem. I have no problem with teaching it at home. All right? My daughter is pansexual. I don't know what the hell pansexual is, but that's how she describes herself. I don't really care. You know what? She's still my girl. I still love her. I may not understand. She may be doing her own thing, whatever, but you know what? She knows she has a father that has 100% of her back covered in any choice she makes. Don't care. But how would the roles, and I bring this up again, Ev, how would the role be reversed if there was a young man, okay, who identified as a young lady at 16, 17 years old, hadn't transitioned bodily yet, okay, and wants to change in the girls' room and shower with the team afterwards? Because
one of the things
that
you said is that this always starts with a girl wanting to be involved in the boys' activity and locker room kind of thing. Do you think that could be because typically girls mature at an earlier age and mature faster and have a grasp or an understanding maybe more of their own feelings versus the typical boy of the same age? Because it does seem like often boys tend to at least become more public about this stuff several years after the average age for somebody experiencing it as somebody who was born a female.
Exactly.
You see what I'm saying?
I know exactly what you're saying. But the locker room is a special place. Okay? And at no point did they say that this young man, all right, this young man, Jesse, okay, couldn't be a part of the locker room. What they said was, go get your gear on. Just like if a girl wanted to play on a boys' team, go get your gear on in another room. Then come on in when everybody at least has their half gear on. Come on in. Come on in. You're part of the team. We're not going to go over all the drills and everything without you.
Boy, that sounds a lot like you're part of the team, sorta.
But there's gender. And I know what you're doing here. And I thank you for that. All right? I thank you for that. But at some time, when is enough enough? Because if the role was reversed, this rule would never be in place. Ever.
And you really think that?
I do. We already have up here, I don't know if it's down there, but up here, I was talking to a friend of mine who went to a female rugby team. They played against a transgender team, who beat the living hell out of them. And every women's team there complained because these women were bulkier, stronger.
The entire team was transgender?
Yes.
That just, I'm sorry, this is going to sound like a horrible thing to say, but that just seems like stacking the deck.
Yeah. It was a transgender female rugby team. So you got all these transgender females who are weighing in at probably $170, $180, 200 pounds, maybe bigger, playing against a ladies' team that's around, the average weight would say be around rugby players are pretty strong and bulky with muscle. So let's say 140, 150, 160, 170. That's a big size difference.
Yeah, that just seems. I'm honestly, I'm surprised that was this in a league? Was this like a sanctioned league?
It was a tournament.
So more of a fun. It wasn't because I can't imagine a league sanctioning an entire a team like that would have such an advantage.
Mm-hmm. So, anyways. I don't know how you feel about that one, but that one got me fired up today. Really, really fired up.
I have to confess I missed that one. Hockey.
Oh, well, it just came down this evening. It literally just came down this evening.
It's 95 degrees here. We're not thinking hockey.
I'm always thinking hockey, my friend. Always thinking hockey.
Well, you're Canadian.
Like I said, I have no problem with the child playing the sport. Every child, in my opinion, you know how they have that mandatory military rule over in Asia and in Europe? I think they should have a mandatory sports rule here. I don't care if it's kick the can or hockey or football. Every kid needs to be playing sports one way or another. Sports and games outdoors.
Here in the U.S., half the time they're arguing about whether or not they can afford to teach the kids physical education.
I hear you. But nonetheless, this one kind of pissed me off. I apologize for taking up your news section there, Everett, but let people know where they can find the encounter.
They can find the encounter at facebook.com/SOR, the encounter online.
All right. Perfect. Thank you so much. I want to say a big thank you to Dr. Carla Wills-Brandon for coming in to talk deathbed visions that people were having before they die. Great show with Dr. Carla Wills-Brandon. You could go to her website, carlawillsbrandon.com. Tomorrow night on the program, we get into premonitions. What are they? How do they become true? Is deja vu involved? Lori Moon Boggs will be our guest tomorrow night starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern Time at spacedoutradio.com. We got Mr. Ron Bumblefoot Thal rocking in the background with Little Brother is Watching. Bumblefoot is the official music of Spaced Out Radio, rocking us in and out of every single show. Get your horns up for the guitar god himself. Don't forget, you can go to questers.ca right now as the show is ending. Questers.ca. Click on the Fall Conference. Get your tickets for the first annual Caribou Paracon presented by Spaced Out Radio and the Canadian Society of Questers, September 28th through 30th. Hey, you need a road trip. Get your butts up here. I want to meet all of our SOR listeners, Grant Cameron, Lorian Fenton, David Weatherly, Ross Allison, and so many more great voices will be speaking. A special thanks to everyone listening at home, in your cars, at work, wherever you may be. A huge thank you to an amazing night on Spreaker for everybody chatting. You were absolutely awesome. Thanks for the wonderful snark at hashtag Spaced Out Radio. Have a drink for us, Goddess Michelle, and to the Veterans Club, the SOR Space Travelers on Facebook. It's all about Team Stump. Thanks for sharing the show, telling your friends and doing your part to make us bigger and better every single night, because together, my friends, we own the night. I will talk to you in 21 hours from now. Mr. Bumblefoot, we need a favor. We need you to take us home. Good night.